Councillor Lajeunesse is with us, attending virtually today. I'd like to begin by recognizing that the District of Sault conducts its business on the territorial lands of both the Sauk and Shawnee nations, and we do wish to recognize their stewardship and their longstanding relationship with the waters and the lands that continues on towards this day. So thank you, everyone. Item number 3 is where we'll begin today. So council, I'm looking for approval of tonight's agenda as circulated, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Pearson. So there's no changes. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. We're going into our delegation section next, of which we have one on tonight's agenda. And that would be for a strata conversion for 2170 and 2172 French Road South. Presentation by Laura and Sean Paul. So we have 5 minutes set aside for you today. So when you start speaking, I'll just need you to turn on the microphone. There's a button on the base of the stem there. And when you start speaking and when you're ready, our staff will turn on the timer and we have 5 minutes for you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening to Mayor and Council tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the matter tonight. My name is Sean Paul, been a resident of Sauk for 13 years now. My wife, Laura Paul, or better known as Laura Bryant, she's 4th generation in Sauk. And we own the building at 2170 and 2172 French Road South. We're seeking that the building, the house residence be given strata title. The house was built by us in 2015 through a contractor. It was built specifically as a duplex. Currently has 2 residential addresses, but only 1 PID. Initially, when we started this process in November of 2022, we thought it was going to be a simple process. We were advised that the strata wouldn't be that difficult, and we have no professional specialized knowledge on the topic, and so took that information that we had at heart. And when we started this process in November 2022, it's gone on a lot longer than we thought it was going to take, and to this date we spent over $12,000 working on the strata through architects, surveyors, lawyers to complete it. For 7 years, we rented out the unit to the same tenant, and in January of 2023, we provided the tenant the information that we were planning on selling the property, and gave her a lot of notice to find her next place to reside. She did during the summer and moved on her own accord. And since then, the second part of the residence, it is built as a duplex, 2 sides, 1,500 square feet each side. The one side that was rented is now empty. It has all its own services. It is specifically set as a duplex. That's the way it was built. That's the way we wanted it. The strata of this residence provides another affordable house to Sauk. And there's no need for any building, no need for anything that needs to be done other than the paper exercise to complete the strata and obviously the approval of council. As I said, the property's been vacant since the summer of 2023. And I can't in any good faith rent it to somebody long-term, because in the event when the house does get sold, that the renter may be forced out of that house. So I can't in all good conscience rent it long-term, knowing that within 3 to 6 to a year's term that that tenant would have to be moved if somebody who bought the house would then live in the house. So until the property strata and sold, I can't rent it long-term. I'm a federal worker. I've worked with the federal government for 35 plus years. And I'm retiring this year. My wife is semi-retired, and the idea was to sell this prior to my retirement to assist with our living. The mortgage will come due in the future, and not having an income on the rental side starts to become a hardship. As well, the frontage requirements that being requested by Suke currently cost somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 to construct. And we've had 2 assessments done on it for the costs. Will also be a financial hardship to us. There have been numerous properties that were strataed, subdivided on French Road South. All of them have maintained the current frontage requirements on that street. So we feel as we're being singled out. I'm not saying we are, but that's just the feeling that we feel. With the strata, it also provides an increase in the taxes to the city. We currently pay only 1 property tax. When it's strata, there would be 2 property taxes. The total of those taxes would exceed the current taxes we pay on a single property. In February 12th, at this council meeting, one of the councillors proposed a motion for staff to provide alternative options for sidewalk contributions from those developing their properties where sidewalks appear a necessity or remain isolated for the foreseeable future. That's exactly what our property is. It would be an example of a sidewalk being isolated as there's no current sidewalks there. And in the previous council meeting we attended, it was identified as a sidewalk to nowhere, requesting that the council allow the strata to proceed without the frontage improvements that reflect what is currently on the entire street, that owners of the property will contribute $3,850 to the Suke Housing Fund.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation tonight. So in terms of how we navigate this, I'm looking to members of council here because I don't have the staff contacts here. So it's difficult to just make a decision. I empathize with where you're at. It's just, you know, I'm feeling this needs, does staff have any comment on where this is? I like, it's not something we can just green light after a delegation. Like it just needs to go through the process here.
I believe some other reports have come forward to council with similar requests, and to Councillor St. Pierre's point, there's no active decision in front of council with a file requesting a variance, so that would kind of be the logical next step. If staff and the owner are at an impasse, then the report could come forward down the road with a request for a variance and see what council will do with that information. But at this stage, it would be premature for council to pass a resolution, I would say, to providing that direction without all the information.
Is there a file manager with this file? Or is it with somebody in staff?
My understanding is that there's no current application in place.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Yeah, I'm just like, where is this in the, is it in, are you working with a staff member and had this and it hasn't gone anywhere, or?
Yeah, one of the staff members we've been working was Lauren McTuzy. The issue we had was, and we looked at getting a variance, but through the lawyer that we've been talking to and Lauren, that was never, you could put the money forward, but it was never a guarantee and you wouldn't get the money back. So it would seem like there was no direction in regards to how this process needed to go. We have put in a submission for a strata, and then city has come back to us and said, these are the frontage requirements that you require to construct prior to the strata being allowed. And none of those frontage issues have been dealt with by other strata subdivisions on the property. So we feel like we're being, like I said, singled out. And the road, I don't know if you guys drove by the road, we asked that you guys would do that prior to the meeting to see what the property's like and what the rest of the properties on the road are like. And it just seems that the request for this compared to what the request for the new stratas, new duplexes on the road seems significantly different than what has been previously done on the road.
Okay, understood. Just 1 second, Councillor Bateman, go ahead, please.
Just the process here, the next steps would be an application to come to council. Council would consider the application and the applicant would have an opportunity to speak to their rationale for not having frontage improvements. Staff, of course, recommend conditions of strata conversion approval. They'd be attached as a schedule to the report. council, it would be up to council to determine if any of the conditions were unreasonable, and they could decide to remove frontage improvements, for example, based on whatever criteria.
Okay, so that's it's in process.
It's, yeah, that's part of the process.
Okay.
correct.
Okay, Counselor, it's in process,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't exactly know where it is in process. I
but you
thought
know
it was
it's in the
pre-application.
process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a process here in place. And staff will bring this to council for consideration with those conditions, and it'd be up to council to choose which conditions were appropriate or not. It's up to council 100%.
So I would say, sir, you're just a bit ahead of the process because it's in the system along with all the other applications. And then it's just waiting for it to come forward to council. So right now, I don't have enough to make a decision on this because I need the staff perspective, but I'll go to my counselors here. I have Counselor Bateman, then Pearson, please.
Yeah, so just to the Paul's point around other properties along French Road South, and I believe bylaw 404 was amended last year to include the transportation master plans complete streets cross section. So through you to Mr. Carter, is that why this particular requirement is necessary in this?
No, even prior to the official amendment, we're still following the transportation master plan, alluding to maybe other properties on the street that don't have frontage improvements done. They could have been either subdivided or developed prior to the adoption of the transportation master plan. Still, it's, yeah, prior to that, but still following the rules of bylaw 404. Which would require them to do some frontage improvements, but it would have been up to council at the time to either vary them or make them go forward with them. So it's just, it puts everyone in a very difficult place. Like with the TMP, the plan is put together with public engagement for every street in Souk, and it sets standards on this is what the cross section will look like of this street in the future. Public consultation is conducted. Basically, it goes out to everyone for opportunities to speak to it, and council has the opportunity to adopt that plan. When staff put forward frontage improvements requirements for any development or subdivision, our job is to literally follow council's policy, bylaw, and plans. It puts us in a very difficult position when asked to work with applicants to reduce cross sections, to eliminate aspects of the cross sections, because what happens is it's now putting staff in a position to set precedents. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because what happens is one property comes forward, asks for a variance, it doesn't make sense for this area, then that report is pulled for the next person that comes forward, and now I have set that precedence. Or I go work with someone in another area, take out one aspect, they will reference that. Going forward to try and address this problem, I will be bringing a report forward to council, and that will be to re-engage potential amendments to the transportation master plan, to go to the public and make it clear. What happens a lot of the time in public consultation for transportation master plans is that people are like, oh, transportation master plan, bunch of road capital projects, all good stuff. We don't really get engaged in the consultation piece, but what the residents don't understand is that it affects them, it affects their neighbors, and these are plans that are put in place for their street, what they're going to look like in the future. And if they develop or their neighbors develop, they will be required to do that. So again, as Jaden alluded to, it will be council's decision to provide a variance, but because of these difficulties, like I can go work with people and eliminate these cross sections. But if I do that, I'm setting a precedence, and that is not good governance and not good.
Okay, Mr.
practice.
Carter, that's not what we're asking. Like, I
But
appreciate where
that's
you're
that's
coming
why
from.
these ones didn't have frontage improvements, most likely, because
Most likely, but it could have been the time, and that's where it's
Mhm.
just the context. I don't have that here, so thank you for that. But at this time, it's more just, okay, what do we do? You know, we have a delegation here, and what is our step forward? Counselor Bateman, are you finished? Okay, Counselor St. Pierre, or sorry, I had Counselor Pearson, then St. Pierre.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to planner, manager of planning. So is a strata conversion, the wording, is it the same for a subdivision? I know lot line adjustment is. What about strata conversion? Is it actual subdivision?
Yeah, it's a form of subdivision, but they'd be creating strata lots on one parcel. Usually
Right.
bisecting the duplex dwelling unit
Okay.
and then being able to sell off those two units.
Okay, so when the strata conversion application comes forward, they have the requirements and then they would follow the provision under the variance, right? They could come to council with a variance request.
There's no variance in this case. Instead, it would be council establishing the conditions of their approval in principle as the approving authority. So staff would recommend what those conditions are. Council would approve them, whether
Okay.
amended or not, and then the applicant would have 1 year to satisfy those conditions for strata conversion subdivision.
So is there a difference between a single lot subdivision and a strata conversion? And I'm just thinking about one of the ones that we just recently did.
Through the chair, so with a subdivision with 2 lots, you'd be creating fee simple properties.
No,
So
just one.
One lot subdivided into 2,
Yep, exactly.
right? You'd be creating fee simple properties.
Mhm.
With the strata conversion, it's usually when you're bisecting say a dwelling, like a duplex in this case, where you're creating strata lots and there's on one title. Essentially, 2 strata lots.
Okay, so the next step then is they make application for the strata, just so that they can make a conversion. The strata conversion, they make application, and you're requesting, based on the TMP, the frontage improvements. They have the opportunity at that point to come to council for a variance.
Again, there's no variance here.
I'm having trouble understanding.
Yeah, so when the application is reviewed internally, our engineering staff provide their recommendations on what those conditions should be. We include that in our report to council and make a recommendation that council approve based on set conditions. Council at that time can make an amendment to those conditions. And that would be the opportunity to say no frontage improvements are required as a condition of strata subdivision. And then the motion would be amended accordingly.
Counselor St. Pierre?
So just to sum up, we have an application in the queue. We don't have the information in front of us right now. When the application comes forward, it'll come forward with conditions, including frontage improvements. At that point in time, in a way similar to a variance, council will have an opportunity to approve the conditions or to remove and amend them. But at this point in time, we can't actually move forward, but the process is moving forward. Correct?
Through the chair, we have an application in place. I've just confirmed that.
Yep.
So excuse me earlier. But yes, that would be the process. Essentially, we would bring this forward to council and then there would be, it'd be somewhat like a variance process, but council could choose which conditions would apply to the strata conversion.
Perfect. So it sounds like the answer right now is that we'll probably see you again, because I'm sure you'll want to speak up at that time as well.
Yeah, so Mr. Paul, I would just follow back up with staff maybe tomorrow and just to get clarity on that. It's and then it'll be as you say, and then they'll be able to give you a sense of what that timeline is. Yes, go ahead, please.
Did he say that we do have an application? Because we did put an application in like 6 months ago. Is that the application you're talking about?
Yes, so I have April 6th, 2023 application submission date.
So question, April 6th, 2023 submission date, we're at February of 2024. How long does it take for an application to go forward? The city has told us in order for us to get to the strata, we must build the street frontages. How does the council then find out that this strata is coming forward? I don't, there seems to be a misplaced. We're told the only way to get strata is to build the frontage. That's the only way. That's what we were told. How do we get it to you or how does it come to the council to make the decision? It's in a holding pattern right now because we're saying we don't want to build the frontage. We shouldn't have to build the frontage because of the rest of the roads the same way. How does it get to council when it's sort of in a holding pattern?
Counselor St. Pierre?
It's not in a holding pattern. It may seem like that just because it's been in process for so long, but what's actually happening here is that it will come forward. You may not actually get, like, for example, if council was to say these conditions with requiring the road frontages must happen, at that point, you will not have your strata conversion without having those road frontage improvements. But that decision will still come before council. So it's not stuck in a holding pattern. It's going to move forward. It'll come to council. Council will deliberate at that point in time. You'll have another chance to make your case. And at that point, it'll move forward either with the conditions as proposed by staff, as put forward by the TMP, or we'll agree with you, or some variation thereof. But it's not in a holding pattern. It's moving forward.
So not to, how do I say this? That information was not provided to us. So the way the process works has not been provided to us. It's just, sometimes it's just nobody's telling us anything and we're frustrated because, and it adds a lot of stress because we're not getting income from the rent because no rental, and we're not being told anything by the city. So it creates more stress, more frustration, and it causes a lot more harm than, I know you're not intending it, but it causes a lot more harm than you guys intend.
No, we can appreciate that. So that's where there's just been, you know, through our CAO and through the staff that are onboarding, is how do we continually improve communication, what's outstanding, who's waiting for pieces, who's with what, and they're doing all of this. So no system is perfect. The feedback, you know, even just with where you're at, we understand that. And through the developmental approval process review that we're also doing is how do we make this easier? And how do we make process improvements that meet the needs of those applying? It could be someone smaller like yourselves that are just doing this, having to navigate the same hoops that somebody doing a large scale 8-story building is. Right now, everything is going through one stream. We recognize that system isn't working. And those are the pieces that are coming along around the way. So what I would encourage you to do tomorrow is just connect with our staff, see if you can have an appointment, and then just refresh where you're at. And they can provide a bit more context, pulling all those pieces together for you.
Continue with Lauren Matuzzi. Is that the way to go?
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We'll see you again, hopefully soon. Okay. All right, thank you very much, everyone. I'll move on to item 5, which is the report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you. Don't have too much to add to the report. Just wanted to point out a couple things and just extend a warm welcome and acknowledgement to our new Chief Larry Underwood of the Sauk Nation, and express my appreciation and gratitude with working with Chief Gordon Plains. And looking forward to reconnecting with the Sauk now that the election is completed, and continuing on with our relationship moving forward. Lots of things in the go, and so I'm definitely looking forward to working with them, whether it's wastewater, economic development, schools, there's lots of housing, there's lots of things going on. So our partnership together in the times to come is going to be valued and appreciated. The other thing would just be the budget. So February 28th, 2 p.m., there's a COW where the first draft of the budget book will be presented. This will be a high-level overview for everybody of where we're at. And then what will follow after this will be department-specific presentations at a future council meeting. So just the budget is built around the What We Heard report, council priorities, implementation of climate plan, transportation master plan, the other various plans we have as well. So this is kind of the culmination of all of that feedback we've received in this report. So looking forward to engaging with council and the community as that information is presented for the first time on February 28th. I'll just leave that there for now and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our CAO? No, okay, thank you very much for the report. And yes, Wednesday. So Wednesday at 2 is sort of a new historic time that we're trying, but it's just finding dates and times at work. And it's probably because February is just a short month. So we have to go with when we have quorum and what works for all of us. So we're doing our best here. And the sooner we get through our budget process, and I'm not suggesting we rush it, means that we can get on with a lot of the necessary work that needs to happen. So thank you, Ms. Gray. I'll go into item 6, which is our public question and comment period. So this is an opportunity for any of the residents present to approach council tonight. We have about 10 minutes set aside, or 2 minutes maximum per speaker. I don't like cutting people off, but in the essence of moving the meeting along, I will be cutting you off at the 2-minute mark. So when you come forward, please just introduce yourself with your name and let us know which item on the agenda you would like to speak to. And it needs to be specific to tonight's agenda. So, anyone wishing to address? Oh, thank you. And please turn on the microphone too.
Hi, Noah Dowie, Souk. Just wanted to speak to item 10.2, new business about a relevant template for a many contribution for affordable housing contributions. Really happy to see this come forward. I know this isn't the last meeting, wasn't the first time this has come up in discussions. So really nice to see some consistency there. Just food for thought, you know, the idea that $3,000, I think it is per door. Anything but the metric system, right? But I don't see how that's taken in lieu of 10% of housing units. It seems ridiculously small. So much would be interested to see that go up or some other metric or method of figuring that out. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other speakers tonight? Okay, can you please turn on the microphone just so our counselor attending digitally can hear you? It's just on the base here. Perfect. And please introduce yourself, Ms. Holgren.
Okay, my name is Sylvia Holgren and my address is 6605 Souk Road. My husband and family have lived in Souk for 45 years. Honorable Mayor and councillors, I would like to address the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, Bill 35. Since moving to Souk in 1979, I'd been actively involved in tourism to promote Souk. We started by offering bed and breakfast in a small cottage in our garden. However, as more tourists came to this beautiful area, we added more accommodation. And we had requests for places to eat, so I opened up a small tea house in our home, which grew into a licensed restaurant and brought people from all over the world for 25 years. We were written up in newspaper reviews as far as Philadelphia and had calls from Hong Kong to reserve for high tea. Our community has grown with tourists coming and rebooking accommodations for the next year, remembering the many wonders of Souk has to offer. The hotel, the Prestige is full most of the summer months, so finding places for people to hold family reunions or fishing trips or homes for workshops with our prized Philharmonic Orchestra, it's difficult. We're a population of 15,000. That's 5,000 more than the residents' requirement bill for 35. And the opt-out is only if the vacancy rate is 3% or more for 2 consecutive years. At present, it's been brought to my attention that Souk may have an oversupply in housing. We have 2 towering 6-story buildings, among other projects. That are not full. And the bill goes on to say that Souk should Souk meet the required 3% or more, an opt-out can be submitted. And this I find is cruel and punishing to those who work so hard for many years to establish a high standard of short-term rentals. Airbnb renters take years to have feedback from guests to build up a 5-star rating. They're being asked to find a long-term renter, but maybe can do short-term if the vacancy percentages change, meaning that they would have to refurbish their properties all over again. And we have operated both long-term rental and short-term in Souk. Short-term rental takes a lot of work and financial output with cleaners, managers, and supplies. However, sharing what the West Coast offers is rewarding. Hotels are money makers for large corporations, while homes that are set up for families and their vacation needs are personal and reflect the community. Hotel prices have gone up and are near impossible for out-of-town families with young athletes like hockey players to come to scheduled games in Souk. Hotels vacuum up money from guests and take it elsewhere, while homes keep tourist money in Souk. Guests buy groceries, visit parks, pay fees, and spend at local shops. This bill to solve the housing crisis is too sweeping in its coverage. Understandably, the turning of wealthy homes and high-rise apartments in big cities into short-term rentals for profit may be the greed of some, but I do not believe it's the case in a small tourist destination of Souk. As a community, we should be making our own exceptions for Bill 35. Why take away something that's good and working for Souk because it's abused in other places? We need to be thinking about our community needs and our future. There should be variances for waterfront and other short-term vacation homes that are available for out-of-town families that continue to make Souk what it's always been, a community that meets the needs of all tourists that come to enjoy our hospitality. And in closing, I need to ask Council for a letter from the District of Souk to forward to Airbnb stating why it's necessary to cancel all the bookings made for this summer in Souk. As Council, you make this decision, and it's sad to me that Council has not even put up a good fight for tourism in Souk and all the good people that have tried so hard to give their best to short-term rentals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hallgren. If you're able to share your letter, so we have it, can you provide it to our staff if you're comfortable doing that? Okay, that's fine. We have it on record. I just, yeah, thank you. Okay, other members of the public wishing to speak tonight?
Hi, it's Steve Anderson, 6788 Blanchard Road. I was just inspired by some old thoughts that I had from a long time ago, and I was inspired by what the member of the public earlier mentioned about the dollars amount per door going towards the 10%, towards homelessness and affordable housing and all that. This is well over 15 years ago. I was living in Langford. I was doing painting houses for a contractor, and that's when a 10% thing came out in Langford, and it's full out. I saw with my own eyes a budget, what the contractor had to do. The houses were selling for 300 to 350,000. He had to build them at cost, sell them for $150,000. And and he did it by the book, what Langford required him. And then I started hearing a couple years later in Souk and other places, in lieu of that, just what, a couple thousand, 3,000 per door. Like that's always kind of didn't sit well with me. That's a far call from 10%, and I'm not sure how that came around and why it's still around like that. But if it's something in the tradition of, someone's building a large number of houses and they're going to beef up or fork up 10% to help affordable housing, then yeah, $3,000 per door, it's not even close enough. So I'd like to say for comment, I agree with what the member of the public earlier said. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify with process, this is a notice of motion, so council will discuss or debate whether or not to advance that motion in that direction. If so, then a further staff report will come before council at an upcoming meeting, of which then we hope that you'll return and give your feedback on what that looks like. Okay, seeing no one else from the public tonight, we'll move on to item 7, which is our consent agenda. So there's only the correspondence on here. Was there anything further that anyone wanted to pull for a future meeting? Otherwise, it would be that the correspondence be received and filed. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I'd like to pull item 10.
Item 10.
Souk's membership in the Urban Development Institute.
So that'll roll to the next meeting. Okay, anything else? Okay, so then the motion would be then that aside from item 10 come to an upcoming meeting, and that the remaining correspondence from February 7th to February 21st, 2024, under agenda item number 7.1, be adopted by general consent and received and filed accordingly. So that's moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Anything further? No, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move into our report section, and first off is 8.1, which is the proposed CRD Regional Water Supply Development Cost Charge Program. And we have a presentation tonight by the Capital Regional District and Urban Systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is.
Just one moment. Sorry, Councillor Lajeunesse, can you see the screen? The screen presentation?
No.
He's just sharing it, so you're good. You're good?
There it is.
Thank you. When you don't see the screen, let us know, okay? Thank you. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure.
Yep, no problem. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Patrick Stevens. I'm a project engineer in the CRD's Water Supply Engineering and Planning Division. And with me tonight also from the CRD are Joseph Marr and Scott Mason. We also have our consultant, Urban Systems, here with us tonight with Sean Heffernan and Samantha Bowen also in attendance. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is to inform and answer any initial questions from District of Sooke Mayor and Council on the CRD's proposed Regional Water Supply Development Cost Charge Program. Any feedback received tonight will be compiled and presented to the Regional Water Supply Commission in March. And we ask that any follow-up questions, concerns, or comments be communicated through our project team, through District of Sooke staff, or brought forward through your representation on the Regional Water Supply Commission. The CRD has been working alongside Urban Systems for some time now to develop the draft DCC program and bylaw for the Regional Water Supply Service and to navigate the implementation process. The project was first identified to be explored through the Regional Water Supply 2017 Strategic Plan and was then identified as a priority by the CRD board in the 2023 to 2026 corporate plan with the intent of implementing the Regional Water DCC bylaw and program. The Water Advisory Committee, as well as the Regional Water Supply Commission, have been informed of our progress to date and have endorsed the continuation of the project to the consultation phase, which we are working through now. The Regional Water Supply Commission will be responsible for providing a recommendation to the CRD board to finalize any program details as well as adopt a new DCC bylaw. For those that may not be familiar, the CRD's Regional Water Supply Service provides bulk drinking water to the municipalities and First Nations in the Greater Victoria area. This includes the supply of water to the CRD's Juan de Fuca Water Distribution Service, which in turn provides drinking water to residents of Sooke where service is available. And the primary water source is Sooke Lake Reservoir, and major components of the system include 3 watersheds, 15 dams, 2 tunnels, 2 disinfection facilities, and nearly 120 kilometers of transmission mains. I'll now hand it over to Sean from Urban Systems to carry on with the presentation. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Council. This section of the presentation will be about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll go through basically the overview of current DCC rates in place in the District of Sooke. We'll talk about the Regional Water Supply DCC program in terms of its program, the program development and the policy considerations used to develop that. And we'll then go through the proposed draft DCCs as well as next steps to implement the program. So quickly, what are DCCs? I know we've had this conversation with council in previous years, but they are fees created through the Local Government Act designed to help local governments recover costs for offsite infrastructure. They are a cost-sharing tool in the sense that they are not just developer pay, that many of the projects are in fact cost-shared. And they are regulated by Section 14, Division 19 of the Local Government Act, the DCC Best Practices Guide. And they require, as all DCCs, a ministerial approval for implementation. The philosophy of DCCs is to ensure that the cost of delivering infrastructure is shared equally and equitably. This means in terms of fostering fairness that growth pays for growth, what is known as the benefit or pay principle. This is done to ensure consistency, minimize financial risk to the CRD, also providing a clear framework for development in terms of the consistent application of development fees and charges. This is also designed to promote transparency and ensure the timely processing of development applications. So DCCs are paid at one of two times. They're paid at time of subdivision for applicants to create single family development sites, as well as at time of building permit for the development of townhouses, multifamily, commercial, industrial, and institutional developments. So the District of Sault currently has DCCs in place for the four other services, so transportation, drainage, water, and sewer. There's also the Juan de Fuca Water Distribution System, DCCs, which is implemented by the CRD and has been in place for over 20 years. The combined total of these existing DCCs is currently just under $20,000 for a single detached unit, $19,250, $11,439 for medium density, $85.73 for commercial, industrial $55.69, and institutional being $98.19. So these are the DCCs currently in place, and the proposed regional water supply DCCs would be in addition to these DCCs. And I'll talk about this a bit down the road, but the Juan de Fuca Water Distribution System DCCs are for distribution. So the regional water supply are for the supply system. So basically, the supply system, as Patrick described, would be the dam, the reservoirs, filtration facilities that actually generate the bulk water, which is then brought to users through the distribution system. So that's the difference. So each local government in the region has a distribution system. For Sooke and the Western communities, it's through Juan de Fuca. The Peninsula has its own distribution system, and in the core, they have their own distribution system. So all those distributions systems for the most part have DCCs in place, and this regional water supply DCC would apply on top of that across all communities in the same amount. So just a quick overview of the program's development. So the program was developed using a 30-year time horizon for growth. This was done to align with the DCC program capital costs and project lists, which were generated through the CRD's capital planning and the regional water supply master plan, which recommends over $2 billion worth of infrastructure upgrades for the next 30 years. And then each project, as we've gone through in previous DCCs, it was assigned a benefit allocation. And this is, again, going back to the cost sharing element of development cost charges. Every project is assigned a benefit allocation, and this determines its relative benefit to new versus existing users. So in many cases, projects have a benefit to not just future growth, but also those existing users. And given the scale and the type of projects in the regional water supply master plan, many of the program projects are actually cost shared. So we'll go through that detail in a few slides here. This is just a quick overview and how the DCCs are calculated. It's a relatively simple equation. Essentially, the amount of the required capital costs are essentially divided by the amount of growth that you're expecting to see over that time horizon. So in this case, the growth is determined, 30 years worth of growth. The project list is then again developed, and then with each of the projects being signed a benefit allocation, there's a total capital cost, and that is the cost that is identified to be paid for through future development and growth. That amount is divided by future growth and the number of units that will be developed over that 30-year time horizon to create the fee per unit. There's also the DCC assist factor, which is a pure policy decision, which is allowed to be made by the regional board in this case, probably through recommendations of the Regional Water Supply Commission, and that would allow the regional board to adjust the overall DCC cost to it reduced the cost of DCCs by increasing the municipal assist factor. So any increase to the municipal assist factor would have the effect of reducing to the DCCs, but they would also have to be made up through non-DCC revenue sources. So this slide provides a quick overview of that, but essentially the Local Government Act requires this assist factor to be in place. It can be at a minimum of 1% and a maximum of 99%. The current proposed regional water supply DCC rates have a 1% assist factored into them currently. Again, this is a policy decision for the regional board. So the DCC project costs, as you can see here on this slide, represent a total program cost of over $1.4 billion. Of which 523.4 million is identified as being DCC recoverable, i.e. the developer's responsibility, with the remaining 920.9 million being the responsibility of existing water rate payers. So there is no taxpayer in this case, so it would be the water user rate, which actually pays the difference between the developer's portion and the existing user's portion. So as you can see, this from this 1.4 billion, the 523 is done created through the benefit allocations, most of which sit around 35%, the majority of which, and this represents the population change anticipated in the region over the next 30 years. So essentially that benefit allocation is saying that these projects are going to be shared proportionally between future users and existing users at 35%. The one project in there at 100%, the Leach Watershed, is a totally new water supply source. This would not be required if there was no growth. So this is essentially just to add capacity for that future development. So if growth were to stop today, that project would not be required. And the other Smith Hill storage tank is the other one with a different benefit allocation at 50%. So this is the renewal of an existing reservoir in the core. And essentially that project is being redeveloped to create additional capacity, but there's also a renewal of that asset in that process, hence why it is shared 50-50. So this was the background behind generating the draft rates. So with the 524 million over the 30 years, this results in a draft DCC rate of just over $9,000 for a low density residential unit. 7,914 for a medium density residential unit. So that would be townhouses, quadplexes, detached secondary suites, and then 5,000, just over 5,000 for high density multifamily unit. Commercial would be 3,392, industrial 1,696, and institutional 7,348. So this will result in a total DCC charge for low density residential in Sooke of 28,293. For a high density unit, it would just be under 12,000 per unit, and for commercial, it would be $119.65 per square meter. This is just it's not an apples to apples comparison. And it's not really a pick a number game, but just to show where that would land Sooke in terms of overall DCC rates in the region and amongst other communities in British Columbia. So the gray bar you can see there is the proposed regional water supply DCC at the end. And again, this would be applied, the same amount would be applied to all communities within the capital region. So this would land kind of in the middle and below Langford in terms of the DCC rates and CRD. So what this table shows, and excuse us for the kind of the small font on here, and the CRD is currently working on a model that actually will show kind of what this is with and without DCCs. What this chart is showing is how the water user rate would change over the next 30 years without the implementation of DCCs. So currently water rates are around 80 cents per cubic meter. With the implementation of the master plan, other ongoing capital investments, operations, maintenance, and other factors, that rate would be growing to almost $3.50 per cubic meter. So with DCCs, this would actually reduce that substantial amount. So that increase would be reduced by about 30 to 40%. So this kind of shows the impact on the water rate with no DCCs were in place. Or no grants were received. And that's the other thing. The CRD intends to pursue grant applications for the implementation of this program. However, through the Local Government Act, you can't include any kind of wishful grant amounts. They have to be in the bank, so to speak, and then they can be included. So, which kind of speaks to this next point around, well, the stakeholder consultation. I'll talk about the next step. But from here, we've undertaken consultation with staff from each local governments to review and refine growth estimates. We've met with most elected officials in the region to present the draft DCC rates. We're here to collect feedback from council tonight. We'll take that feedback along with feedback from other councils to the Regional Water Supply Commission to provide an update on the project. At that point, they will determine whether or not to move forward with stakeholder consultation with the general public and the development community. At which point, if we'll then take that feedback back as well, refine that, present that back to the Regional Water Supply Commission. If it is then if the commission intends to move forward, the bylaw will be brought forward for 3 readings and then be sent to the inspector municipalities for approval before coming back for 4th and final reading and adoption. So that's kind of the process moving forward. So if adopted, the DCC program would not be implemented likely until early 2025. As all DCC programs have on the Local Government Act, there's a 12-month in-stream protection period. So many applicants would not be impacted by these new DCC rates until 2026. The CRD will reevaluate this program every 5 years to account for changes in growth, project costs, and any grants received. And that's an important element of any DCC program, is that they're maintained and they're updated over time to reflect how changes in growth patterns will occur. Again, the receipt of any grants, as well as changing project costs. The CRD has diligently updated its other DCC bylaws. Juan de Fuca has done an update every 5 years. It's currently in the process of being updated as well. And that will be the process going forward. Thanks very much. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor St. Pierre, please.
I'll try and keep this really brief. I'm curious as whether or not future DCCs are affected by grants. So if we do get grants, are those DCCs adjusted to take the grants into account?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct. So any grants would actually be deducted off that total project cost, and that would have the impact of reducing the DCCs.
Okay, perfect. In terms of water fees paying for the infrastructure in general, what I'm understanding is that a lot of infrastructure needs to be renewed no matter what. Obviously, if you're planning on expanding population and looking at more water use, you're going to put a bigger pipe in while you're renewing it anyway. But that's generally, putting in a bigger pipe is not, it's quite cheap compared to actually just doing all the work. Does this formula take that into account?
Through the mayor, yes, this process looks at a number of projects, and in that list too, there's a number of transmission mains that are being updated for capacity reasons. They're also being updated for resiliency reasons, as well as level of service improvements as well. So a number of the projects too also are to make the water system more resilient, as well as provide that higher level of service. And that's why the projects, like when we think about the filtration plant and other things, are cost shared proportionately between new and existing users, because everyone's going to benefit from having that additional water quality and level of service.
Thank you.
Other councillors? Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
The chair to you. Thank you for the presentation. So a couple of questions. The DCC assist factor, but 35% sharing with the existing versus, is that based on the actual projected growth, the population growth? That's the 35% that we're seeing in there. Okay. So 80 cents to 350 per cubic meter. That's a 400% lift to the average taxpayer. So what?
Or is it's water user?
Water user.
Not taxpayer.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Sorry, yeah, water user, yes. Thanks for that good correction. What factors have you looked at, or have we projected a decrease in water, like water conservation, more restrictions on outside, rebuilding resiliency. Is that also factored into this, or is it just kind of, are we looking at?
Yeah, through the mayor. So this goes back to the process that was used when we were developing the 2022 master plan. There was a good look at water consumption in that plan, and what we noted is previously there was a large decrease in per capita water demand, say from the 80s to the early 2000s. And when we were looking at the master plan, that trend flattens out, say from 2009 to 2019, the last 10 years. So what we did is we took that average of that last 10 years at that time and carried that forward as the per capita consumption in projecting out to the future. So that's really the basis of the water consumption. Was we found that it had been flatlining for that past 10 years and move forward with that average.
Okay, excellent. And then one statement that was in there somewhere says if the DCC is adopted. My question is, what if it's not?
Through the mayor, if the DCC bylaw is not adopted, then the rates will not apply. And then the water user rate will have to compensate for that.
Okay. And so that you've answered my question. The project is going ahead regardless if the DCCs are adopted or not. That's right. Like get right down to the
The DCCs are a funding tool to reach that goal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lajeunesse, did you wish to speak? You don't have to. I just wasn't sure if, I thought you waived, but I may be wrong.
No, I just, has there been any thought to having an independent review of the master plan? Just, we're talking about significant increase. And I'm just wondering if through innovation and reduction in water usage, if these numbers will hold true.
Yeah, through the mayor, there was a motion raised at the most recent Regional Water Supply Commission meeting last week. And that motion was for a third-party independent review of the master plan, and that motion was not carried through there last week.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation, and to you, Councillor Pearson, for requesting it. It's something of a warm-up, I guess the DCC-oriented warm-up for this meeting on Friday, special meeting of the CRD Water Commission, and at which Island Health will be present to discuss the master plan as the regulator. So these DCCs are specific to the 5-year capital plan. Is that right? The priorities within the 5-year capital plan, and then they will move outward to deal with this 30-year horizon. Is that correct? More or less?
Through the mayor. So the DCC program is set up on a 30-year revolving timeframe.
Yeah.
And so, yes, one of the sources into the project list was the 5-year capital plan, and the other major source of projects being the master plan, which also has a 30-year timeframe.
Right. And given, for example, our next item on the agenda will be Sooke going ahead with a DCC minor update with over 2 years since we passed that bylaw. And would these DCCs possibly be reviewed in a period shorter than the 5-year best practice? I think you mentioned, Sean.
Yeah, through the mayor, it could be a possibility. I think we would plan on the 5-year regular intervals, but that's all depending on a number of factors.
And if the Water Commission and the board determined that these were not rejected, these DCCs, the master plan would have to be completely overhauled, I would imagine.
Not clear on the question there.
That was more of a hypothetical.
I think it's more the case the master plan happens and what would, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what's needed to ensure a safe drinking water supply for the region. And then it's the case of how do we pay for this?
Mhm.
So then if there is no DCCs that contributes, then it's solely on the water rate itself. And that's where it would go from the 80 cents per cubic meter to 3.50 per cubic
Right.
meter. However, with the DCCs coming in, I guess that leads, thank you, Council. Are you completed? Because then I have a question.
Well, yeah, and that
Okay,
would
go ahead.
reduce, if the DCCs, it would reduce it by 35%. I think you were saying that per cubic liter rate.
But then I guess that leads to my question in that, without the DCCs, it jumps to the 3.50. With the DCCs as proposed, then it seems the cubic meter rate would remain the same or go down. Did I catch that right?
Yeah, so like Sean mentioned, we are working on we'll be taking a staff report to the commission in March, and we are working on some different graphs that show the impact of the DCCs. So yeah, you're correct. That bulk water rate would roughly come down 35%.
Okay.
With DCCs.
Right, and then if, let's say, hypothetically, it was like, okay, that DCC is too much, then it could be then of an in-between where then the bulk water rate would increase somewhat over time to make up for the difference that the DCCs are not paying into, because the 2 billion, or that was it? Yeah, 2 billion still needs to be achieved somehow. And if it's not through grants, then it is strictly the user pay. Will have to pay, really.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Right, okay, go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
So 35% reduction would be on the 3.50 rate, not the current rate. Yeah, okay.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, at first I heard it like, well, do we really need the 80 cents to go down? I don't think so. I think that has room to incrementally increase a little. But then it'll depend on how folks are conserving. And that's where you're seeing the flat line occur because the consumption is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Okay, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, and thanks for Councillor Pearson for, insisting that you come here, because it's very interesting. Just that, you're going to go to the development community where I suspect you might get some pushback, because again, my concern is the overall cost to somebody. We're trying to get people into houses and homes, and we ask for DCCs, you ask for DCCs, and it starts adding a lot of money onto some of these homes, before they even get started. So I'd be interested in, when are you planning to do that consultation with the builders?
Through the mayor, yeah, if we're given approval by the Regional Water Supply Commission, in our meeting with them on March 20th, I believe, they will review the draft rates, the feedback that we've collected, and any additional information presented that time, and they will then determine whether or not we move forward with that consultation or make further adjustments.
So that's when the builders and developers will come in.
That's correct.
Okay, be interesting to see that one. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from anyone on that note?
So one question. So the bulk water rates will be increasing regardless of whether the DCCs are implemented or not. And if with a 35% reduction, whatever it was, that means the bulk water rates will increase by 267%. Is that right?
Through the mayor, we are still working on developing a model to determine exactly that impact. But yes, there will be an increase to the overall bulk water rates with or without DCCs. It's just the extent of that impact, and DCCs will have a will support the implementation of the program and reduce the overall increase of water DCC rates if they're adopted by the regional board.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining with us tonight. We really appreciate the presentation, and thanks for sending in advance, and of course for being here tonight. You're all welcome, of course, to stay right through to the end of the meeting. We like to have folks in the gallery, so feel free to get comfortable there, but otherwise, we also know that you have other places to be, so if you need to exit, we understand that as well, but appreciate your time. Okay, thank you. Okay, so speaking about DCCs, that takes us to our next report, which is 8.2.
Thank you, Mayor Tate. Through your worship to council, there's nothing much more to add to the report, but in general summary, in February 2021, district undertook reconstruction and development of a new DCC program, as well as a new DCC bylaw. In June 13th, 2022, the bylaw and program was adopted. So 3 years has passed since we sort of initiated what costs would be identified for the capital projects within that bylaw. There's been substantial inflation in construction costs as well as the economy. So what myself and staff and our consultants have done have looked at the recent tendered prices that we've received within the district over the last year. And we basically brought in proposed rate changes into our DCC bylaw up to approximately 35% to match our DCC program costs with actual construction costs that we're seeing today. Again, this is only a minor update, so it's not a major update. So it's strictly and solely costs that can be adjusted in this, and the tool to do that is through the minor update. So staff are looking for direction from council to proceed with a public consultation where we'll update the district's development cost charge webpage, engage with the development industry, including Urban Development Institute and Sooke Builders Association with proposed rates, and an invitation to members to participate in a virtual meeting with a question period. Nothing more to add to it, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. It's pretty straightforward. I guess the question I have is, this is year 3 since implementation. Would you then start, and our plan was to do a review every 5 years. So would you still then do another review in 2 years' time, or would this start the next 5-year cycle?
Yeah, through your worship to council, typically, as Sean has alluded to from Urban Systems, 5 years is typical to look at these minor updates, and sometimes 10 years you'll look at doing a major update where projects come in, come out, grants are received, and you can change monetary values as well as projects. 5 years is typical for the minor one. We would probably be looking at either a minor update or a major update within 5 years from now, just given the economy and the change in cost being so substantial over the last few years. So an answer, within 5 years, you'd see probably a major update.
Okay, that's fine. Counselors, did I see your hand? Okay. Do you have a question?
I do have.
Okay, can we just, I'll come to you for the motion. Counselor
Yeah.
Bateman just has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Through you to Mr. Carter. So I'm looking forward to this public consultation. I think one of the key things you need to show us your homework.
Stakeholder consultation.
Stakeholder consultations. Because as much as this is a minor DCC increase, it's 35% across all land uses, which to the payee will feel like a major hit. And of course, that detailed rationale on how construction costs have risen on Vancouver Island. There's all sorts of evidence, and it would be great to see that captured in district documentation. I have a quote here from a board member, John Stovall of the Urban Development Institute. Construction costs have increased more than 50% since mid-2020, he told the Globe and Mail. So that sort of information will sweeten what will be felt to be a hit. Now, the other question I had, you have added cost estimate with contingency categories to the project's list page. Could you explain why you've done that?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bateman, the contingencies are added, and you're just seeing that right now, but they were added in before as well. Everything has increased, so the project costs have increased, and then the contingencies have increased proportionally as well. And just for clarification, we did bring a lot of the prices as close as we could to actual value, but understanding that we are trying to still accommodate affordable housing and development while still collecting the appropriate funds to deliver on some of these transportation and other category projects in sanitary and parks. We brought it up close, but it's still not exactly there. We'll match that probably in a major update, but 35% was very reasonable in terms of bringing it close to the actual cost, but we're still quite not there. And it would be more or less a 50 to 60, 70% update on some of the projects to get them up there. Like you alluded to, 50% in general construction costs have increased. And then with inflation on top of that, it's pretty substantial. So 35% fairly reasonable.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is that council directs staff to proceed with the following consultation process related to the proposed minor update to the district's development cost charge bylaw number 775/2021. 1, provision of a brief update on the district's development cost charges webpage. 2, sending a letter to the Urban Development Institute and Souk Builders Association with proposed rates and an invitation for members to participate and to provide feedback. And 3, hosting a 1-hour virtual presentation with question period. So moving by Councillor St. Pierre, as it's done, Councillor Beddoes is seconding. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Not much. I think this is simply stuff that needs to happen so the development can continue. I understand these are projects that are required by the development community. Hope it goes well.
Councillor Beddoes, any comment?
No, just again, I think it's something needed, and being that consulting will take place, I think it's a good thing. Thank you.
Any comments from anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor? And any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next up is 8.3, council procedural bylaw, possible amendments.
Thank you. So I just have a brief presentation. To walk through some of the changes, I'll just wait for Brian to bring the slides up. Thank you.
You're seeing the slide, Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So with the passage of Bill 44 and the resulting amendments to the Local Government Act, local governments are, in certain circumstances, no longer permitted to hold public hearings regarding rezoning applications. Generally, this is the case where applications are in alignment with the community's official community plan, and the majority of the bill is dedicated to residential development. On February 12th, 2024, Council received the first applications where, under provincial direction, we are prohibited from holding the public hearing. In living this change, we learned that more clarity was needed in navigating related applications. The goal of this presentation is to provide greater context for Council's consideration as staff seek direction on updates to the Council Procedure Bylaw and related actions. As Council is aware, the province provides direction on the Municipal Procedure Bylaw, which explains that the purpose of the bylaw is to, while not exclusively, establish rules of procedure for council meetings, including how resolutions may be passed and bylaws adopted. Specific to the Council's February 12th meeting on public participation at council meetings, the procedure bylaw that the public question and comment period be limited to a total of 10 minutes unless extended by council, with each speaker being allotted 2 minutes per presentation, and that a member of the public must not address council or committee regarding a bylaw for which a public hearing has been held, where the public hearing is required under an enactment as a prerequisite to the adoption of the bylaw. As written, the procedure bylaw allows members of the public to address any item on the agenda where a public hearing is not held. With the information available today, staff believe it's reasonable for council to interpret this as any item on the agenda, which in this case would include when public hearings are prohibited. It's important to note that a key difference between our public questions and comment period and public hearings is that there is no prescribed time limit with the latter, although council may, if they feel it is appropriate, prescribe limitations on presentations by members of the public during a public hearing. This distinction is important as the district strives to remain in compliance with the provincial direction and apply a quote unquote reasonable interpretation of the practical implications of this legislative change. So what is reasonable? The reality is that we are navigating unprecedented change. The Supreme Court of Canada shares a reasonable decision is based on a logical chain of reasoning. It has to make sense in light of law and the facts. A correct decision is only the right answer in the light of law and the facts. Of note, correct is often understood when we have hindsight, and in this case, there is none. There's no case law and therefore, again, no precedent. So this is in reference to Council's direction to understand what risk is associated with how we're managing conversations where we're prohibited against holding public hearings. In short, we're simply doing our best with the information we have today and applying logic as we see appropriate. On their website, specific to the changes that we're navigating, the province states the following. Currently, rezoning processes, including public hearings for standalone housing projects, are creating lengthy delays and adding costs. In many cases, the housing being discussed is supported or encouraged in the OCP. To speed up the building of homes for people and support proactive planning, one-off, site-by-site public hearings for rezonings have been phased out for housing projects that are consistent with OCPs, which already have their own public hearing. There will instead be more frequent opportunities for people to be involved in shaping their communities earlier in the process when OCPs are updated. These opportunities include a public hearing on the OCP, provide for more meaningful engagement opportunities for a greater number of community members to participate. Public hearings will continue to be required whenever local governments update or develop new OCPs or consider rezonings for projects that are not consistent with OCP. People will also still be able to engage with their local elected officials about housing projects through other channels and forums. Local governments will continue to approve development permits and building permits for small-scale, multi-unit housing and rezoning applications that are beyond small-scale, multi-unit housing requirements and zoning bylaws. An important component of this change is to once again emphasize that it only applies to select applications that are in alignment with the OCP. Public hearings will continue to be required whenever a local government updates or develops new OCPs or considers rezoning for projects that are not consistent with the OCP. It's also important to remember that the goal of this change is to expedite the building process as a means to respond to the housing crisis and generally move public participation earlier in the building and development process. So in reading the statement from the province, it references quote unquote, more meaningful engagement. But what does this mean? Developer-hosted public information sessions will provide a clear mechanism to connect developers and residents as developments are being proposed and at a stage where changes can still be made relatively easily, as opposed to after developers have incurred potentially significant costs only to be redirected. This helps to ensure that the concerns and feedback of residents are taken into account before plans are finalized, potentially leading to more acceptable and harmonious development. Further, these sessions develop transparency on the part of the developer, showing a willingness to engage with the community and be open about their plans. This can help build trust between the developer and residents, fostering a more positive relationship through the development process. With the legislative shift in OCP update frequency, 5 years instead of quote unquote 10-ish, that we are currently practicing, SOOC can be more responsive to the reality of our evolving community with changing demographics, economic conditions, and environmental considerations. Updating the OCP every 5 years allows for more regular adjustments to reflect these changes, ensuring that the plan remains relevant and responsive to current needs and priorities. With this in mind and the prohibitions of public hearings when there is alignment with the developments, we can more efficiently realize our development potential versus the concept resting as an aspirational document consideration. So an in-depth review of the entire procedure bylaw is in the long-term work plan for corporate services. However, given the feedback provided at the February 12th council meeting, council may wish to consider a revision to extend the maximum time allotted to the public question and comment period from 10 to 20 minutes. Staff feel that by doubling the current allotment time for public question and comment period effectively emphasizes council's commitment to local government transparency and the importance for you on public participation. Staff suggests that it may be reasonable for council to receive comments on agenda items, including where public hearings are prohibited for the time being, in particular, while the development procedures bylaw comes into practice and developer-hosted public information sessions are defined and put in place. This approach is something that staff can monitor, and we would provide follow-up to council should differing direction at any point in managing this change be received. So through the discussion on February 12th and in 2024 and in compiling this report, staff recognized that the district does not have a public participation policy, which may help capture the value and importance council places on public participation. Should such a policy be desirable, council may wish to direct staff to develop one that captures the vast amount of engagement mechanisms we are currently using. With the legislative changes and the need for council to approve an updated OCP by December 2025, council may, subsequent to a public participation policy, wish to direct staff to prepare an OCP public consultation plan that acknowledges the work being done on OCP bylaw number 800, along with the provincial housing regulations and direction from the province that, quote, among other requirements, OCPs must identify areas for residential development to meet anticipated housing needs for at least the next 20 years, and must also include policies for affordable housing, rental housing, and special needs housing. And with that, I'll leave you with the following possible recommendations on the screen, and I look forward to hearing your discussion, and I'm certainly happy to take any questions and answer them as best as I can with the information I have today.
Thank you very much for both the report and your presentation. It's interesting because I know that it's the province that has set this out, and it's like, you must do this. And so it's we are in sort of a place of reactive. I just remember like all these sessions on public hearings, and you must enter them with an open mind. You can be sued otherwise, and you obtain 1/3 of your decision-making from that whole process. And now it's like, no, not needed anymore. So it's quite something. It's interesting when they say that elected officials can engage with other channels and forums. And so it's like, okay, whoever wrote that from the province, like, what do you mean by that? If you're talking about the wilds of social media, I don't necessarily think that's safe. And so like, what channel, like, are you talking YouTube channel comes to mind? Some, like, what is that exactly? And then in terms of developer hosted public, certainly over the last year, we've seen developers do that on a voluntary basis. Where they're hosting sessions. The two recent ones chose not to. So what if they don't? What if the developer's like, no, don't want to do it? And or how are they messaging out? Certainly through your work and the work of our staff, we've been trying to actively reach as many people as possible. And it's a wide communication net that goes out. So what do developers have for that level of engagement to communicate? Is it going to be just a print ad, a Facebook ad that some will see? And like, how do they even get that messaging out when we've done everything possible? And yet we still have people saying, we don't know what's going on in your town. And then meanwhile, next to you, there's, when it comes to development or public hearings, usually where folks, I think, can sometimes be, okay, something's happening, is either their realtor has maybe done some due diligence, or in an established neighborhood, like the sign goes up and you're driving by the sign, something's happening, it's in the paper. So now I'm assuming there'll be no sign going up, nothing and then we put notification in the paper. But, even I hear from residents when they come in for a public hearing, like, well, it all sounds like it's a done deal, because of all of the background pieces. So it's really hard. It's a big expectation on residents just to keep up with what's going on. And usually it's the case where the sign is what's triggering, there's something coming now. So, but that's where I just think it's like, it feels to me that no, they don't want to hear from residents. We're finding a way for you not to get in the way, because it's the housing crisis what matters, and the units need to get on. And maybe in some jurisdictions that's the case, but I mean, in Sooke, we've done our share and then some, and we're trying to now catch up with all of that that's happening, and we still can't reach everyone. And also it's the case of, you know, it's difficult, and just even to know that these events happen, that, and then residents can come to them. So and that's whereas my understanding, if a developer chooses not to do it, then they don't have to. There's no consequence to not doing it. But we're the ones, or return any phone calls. And that's where sometimes the benefit of a public hearing is that some of the concerns, the developer in that moment is able to address them and maybe answer those questions. And in some cases, some residents can be like, okay, at least I understand more about what's happening and it's been resolved, as opposed to others that are no, not at all. And then if it's 5128 something limited, you wouldn't even know who to call, right? So this is going to be interesting. I don't like it at all. I don't like not hearing from the public. So I think, but what that leaves us with is basically, as residents come forward, it's explaining the provincial directive, and then just, this is what's happening, which is why I appreciate your piece on the public participation policy and also the OCP public consultation plan. It may be the case where that OCP, like open houses that we need to do every 2 years, just so people can stay in tune of what's actually happening and changing in their neighborhoods. That's a tough one. Councillor St. Pierre.
I like what's here in terms of helping us with the process. I was curious about the report that we had from Urban Systems, and some of it actually seemed to touch on public engagement. And I was wondering about working with Urban Systems towards looking at when and what forms of public engagement should be happening within the development process to be where the input could be most useful and most benefit while minimizing additional costs and delays. So there should be some answers in terms of that, given that we're looking at the development process as to when that public engagement should happen and what kind of public engagement. The other channel of communication that I know has been coming up is correspondence. And often on a development, we'll end up with a fair amount of correspondence. I know the Qualicum Beach has a best practices approach of, as far as I'm concerned, best practices of actually attaching said correspondence to any reports that are coming forward. And I think that sort of thing does happen as well here. But I don't know if that goes in would that happen in the council procedure bylaw? Is that where we put that in? Or is that something separate? Because that's a channel of communication that we should probably streamline, make sure that the public knows they've been heard, that the information is going to the right places to be incorporated in reports. The council will have a chance to see it.
Sorry, for clarification, through your worship, are you speaking of the correspondence package just in general?
I'm speaking of the correspondence package and how it's dealt with. At this point in time, I know that specific councillors are pulling out pieces that relate to a particular development, if they see that there's a theme, so on and so forth. I know that sometimes prior to a report coming forward or some particularly contentious issue coming forward, we'll end up with a whole bunch of letters as a late submission, and we'll read that through. I don't know if that's actually, how is all that captured and attached to the reports so that when the decision is made, we get all that information. I know some of it's already happening.
I don't think it's in the council procedural bylaw. I think it's more in how, like, it would be more of a correspondence policy, or it would be outside the procedural bylaw. It would be more of either a guide or how we handle correspondence. So I think that's another.
Okay, that might be part
piece.
of that might be part of a public participation policy. How do we deal with public participation in the form of correspondence?
And the correspondence is on staff's work plan to look at this year in response to council's feedback that had been identified. So we can see if that can be incorporated into the scope of the public participation policy, or if it's better suited more independently, but that's something we can certainly take a look at.
Thank you. And my question with regards to Urban Systems or the development process, what would be happening with that most likely? Through your worship to staff.
Yes, so through the chair, we're working with Urban Systems right now, anticipating them to come back with a draft development applications procedures bylaw in April. And that's where council and staff and Urban Systems can start discussing, I guess, the correct procedures for requiring public information meetings in advance of applications coming forward to council for consideration. So the triggers are unknown at this stage, but it will be part of that discussion with the draft bylaw.
Thank you.
Councillor Bateman, then Beddoes.
Yeah, through you, thank you for the report and the recommendations, which weren't in the staff report, of course, but I crafted something very similar. So thank you for that. I'm curious, now back at our meeting of December 11th, Committee of the Whole, we recommended that if meetings are hosted by the applicant, there needs to be a set guideline approved by council with council expectations. And that's for these developer public information sessions and, very importantly, companion resources for people who can't make it to those particular meetings. So would those guidelines be emerging through the public participation policy?
Through your worship, no, I would see that under the development procedures bylaw and a part of that process as it comes forward. So this specific intent of this discussion was specific to the council procedures bylaw. However, recognizing it has those other touch points. So that's where I would see that housed as specific to the development procedures bylaw.
Okay, to Councillor St. Pierre's point, I was pulling correspondence from the correspondence package that related to the OCP in particular. And that was 3 or 4 months ago. And I took it that that kind of correspondence would automatically be appended to any public hearing documents or further reports. And I've stopped pulling those. For example, the Murray Road Park has been quite a substantial volume of correspondence. So I look forward to seeing that new approach. There is the matter of encouraging individuals to write us on any subject to info@souk.ca and council@souk.ca on any matter. It's entirely your right. And there's the matter of informal petitions. In the community charter, it does state that individuals can. So these are things to discuss at the public participation. And there's some great models out there. Coquitlam, Surrey, Revelstoke, Cowichan Valley all have public engagement strategies, toolkits, and other documents that we could draw on for guidance.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the staff for bringing this forward. I think the 10 minutes to 20 is what small stopgap we can do at this point in time. I'd like to echo the mayor's comments that I'm just aghast at this. Democracy is a step backwards. And I feel very strongly that the citizens of Souk should be able to comment on just about everything we do in a manner that is here and now. So that being said, this is forced upon us, and I don't think there's anybody around this table that's exactly happy with it. The other thing is to staff, when we go to the OCP public consultation plan that builds on the OCP bylaw 800 engagement, we have to do much more than we've done in the past, because my experience is that people don't pay a whole lot of attention to things in that sort of beginning stage. Where they get very serious about it is when it appears in their backyard. In the old days, there'd be a sign on the corner that they walked by for the last 5 years. So it's going to be a lot of work for you, and it's going to be cost for us, because the last one, I don't know what we spent on the OCP and not even finished it. And then this stuff came forward. Sorry, excuse me. But that was like $250,000, I believe. So that's going to be quite, every 5 years, if we're doing this, maybe it won't be as much. But with the additional time going to be required to get this information to the public and try and convince them to take an interest at the OCP level rather than fighting it out in council chambers 2 years later. Is there any indication from the government that we're going to get some money to do this? Whoever answers the question. Substantial money. I know they kicked around $1 billion. We know where that went.
So through your worship, there is a portion that is coming our way. How that is exactly expensed, it's being determined. So that'll come through your budget discussions, but there's roughly 200, I believe it's 227,000 or 221, somewhere in that neighborhood. in relation to all of the new legislation that has come down from the province. So that's not specific to the OCP. That's also funding available for zoning bylaw updates, engineering, wastewater capacity for changes to the SMU regulations, et cetera. So staff are determining the best use of those funds, and we'll follow up with council accordingly.
So $250,000 for everything, and it costs us that much to do an OCP. Okay, thanks for staff for being diligent and getting this information to us. I'm still not too happy with this whole situation, but so be it. Thank you.
Councillor Pearson?
Yes, thank you. Thank you through the chair to you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the recommendations. I think it's important to note of, how we got here. That gets kind of lost in the foray is that, we have our big brother stepping in because they want more houses built and they want them built more faster or quickly. But I believe in plagiarism and, not spinning our wheels as much. To Councillor Bateman's point, there is best practices that are out there. And this really is, again, this is another UBCM issue. We feel like we're fledgling, along here, fumbling our way, trying to figure it out. And you know what? The province has some skin in the game here and should be addressed to all municipalities, not just the big 2 or 3. There's a lot of small municipalities in our province that are requiring the same thing, and they're probably talking about the same thing tonight in their meetings. So, I think that we should be reaching out to other municipalities through our UBCM process, or even AVICC.
It'll start at AVICC. This year, UBCM will be interesting because the writ will have dropped for the provincial election. The province will be in caretaker mode for this year's UBCM. So the ability to advocate, we meet whenever that happens in the cycle, we're meeting with ministerial staff. We can sometimes shift around. So it's always an interesting year. UBCM right now is doing a lot of advocacy on the behalf because it's all about local government consultation. So while I'm not on the board, just following what they're doing with the housing summit and with ongoing advocacy by the board itself, it's occurring, but we'll get more clarity at AVIC would be our best bet this year. Just on the recommendations, the only one that I would look to add is that my understanding is that corporate services had some minor housekeeping changes specifically around, that's why we have the special council meeting and I don't remember, but there was a reason why the special council meeting happens because the in-camera is when it's before a meeting or something, I think. So maybe at that time we could capture that and it would just save everyone from having to publish that additional agenda. But I don't, maybe I'll just add one when we get to this, that corporate services housekeeping recommendations or something, and I'll leave it with you to figure out exactly what that is. Councillor St. Pierre. Okay, we do need to read them out, and the reason why I'm doing that is so that because this is on YouTube, there's the voice to text.
Absolutely.
Whatever that's called happens. It's not accurate, but it's just so anyone can see what the texting is.
Okay, so the council directs staff to bring forward an amended council procedure bylaw to extend the public question and comment period from 10 to 20 minutes. The council directs staff to develop a public participation policy and bring forward for discussion at the next available committee of the whole. The council directs staff to develop an OCP public consultation plan that builds on the OCP bylaw number 800 engagement after the public participation policy is endorsed and relevant information on the 2023-2024 related legislative changes is known from the province.
And then just to add, and that council directs staff to bring forward any housekeeping amendments recommended by corporate services. Can you move all of that?
Yep.
Okay, so that's all moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any comments on the motion?
Very quickly, the first two just make complete sense, especially the first one, 10 to 20 makes a lot of sense. We need a public participation policy at this point to deal with this and to address it effectively. And obviously we need to move over the OCP. So I think these are all pretty straightforward.
Councillor Bateman, any comments?
Yeah, I'm pleased with all three, particularly number 3. And I think I would suggest that you might start with a very rough version of this OCP public consultation plan so that the community understands that we are getting these directions in the summer and that we must be complete by December 2025, and then make it asterisk to be changed.
Any comments from anyone else? See none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, next up is 8.4, the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, Bill 35. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Thank you. There's no presentation for this item here. So this report is for information purposes intended to provide council with an update regarding Bill 35, the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, which will come into effect on May 1st of this year. The purpose here, with like the other bills, is intended to help address the housing crisis in BC by returning. Yeah. Okay. So the purpose of this act is intended to help address the housing crisis in BC by returning short-term rental units to the long-term rental market. The act essentially sets a regulatory floor that local governments must meet, or they may also exceed. The act does not apply to hotels or motels or recreational vehicles or temporary shelters. And most importantly, the district zoning bylaw currently is confirmed to meet the legislation. Therefore, no zoning bylaw amendments are required at this time to align with the act. So key points as noted in the report is that the key components of the act include a principal residence requirement. So starting May 1st, this is specific for communities with populations over 10,000. In this case, short-term rentals must be limited to a host principal residence, secondary suite or accessory dwelling on the same property. Commercial and other uses that are exempt from the principal residence requirement includes lodges, strata, guest suites, mountain resorts, electoral areas, regional districts, timeshares, and also strata titled hotels or motels. There is an option to opt out or opt in. The district is already in, so the district may opt out of the principal residence requirement subject to confirmation of a vacancy rate above 3% for 2 consecutive years. Currently, the Greater Victoria metro area is 1.5%. We don't have any vacancy rate data for Sooke specifically. And also you'd have to apply to the province in March to take effect in November of each year. So it'd be a recurring process to opt out once that vacancy rate hits 3%. Other key components of the legislation is the display of a business license. So effective May 1st, short-term rental hosts are required to display business licenses on their listing whenever it's advertised, wherever it is advertised, all the platforms. Also registration with the province to occur in late 2024, early 2025. So the province is making it mandatory for all short-term rentals to list their registration number on all platforms such as Airbnb and Vrbo, including those exempt from the principal residence requirement. Declaration will be required upon registration if a principal residence requirement is indeed exempt. Also, there's increased penalties. So the new legislation allows a district to ticket those not complying with its regulations up to $3,000 per infraction from $1,000. That's under the community charter. There's also provincial compliance and enforcement unit that will be established later in this year. And also the data sharing and coordination between the province and local government on listing data. Details have yet to be determined on the full scope of what that data sharing looks like. And just some key context for Sooke. So short-term rentals are permitted as an accessory use currently under vacation accommodation and bed and breakfast. And these are permitted in our single family zones. So R1, R2, and R3, as well as the rural residential zones. So RU1 to RU5 and a couple comprehensive development zones. So these are, of course, subject to a business license and will be required to register with the province under the legislation. So short-term rentals are permitted as a standalone use and exempt from the principal residence requirements in some commercial zones and CD zones, such as hotel, motel, hostel, and campground. These are completely exempt from the act. But you also have tourist cabin, tourist accommodation chalet and lodge, as well as strata titled hotel and motel. These would be subject to commercial business licenses and must register with the province. Short-term rentals currently are not permitted in multifamily dwelling types like townhouses, duplexes, and apartments, as they don't permit home-based business or vacation accommodation, which is our terms for a short-term rental. They're also not permitted in institutional water zones, or most of the CD zones don't include those two uses either. So just in summary, no amendments to the district zoning bylaw is required in order to align with the act, which will take effect May 1st. Both residential and commercial short-term rentals will be required to register with the province and obtain business licenses from the district. And where short-term rentals is a permitted use as an accessory use, a home-based business license is required, and the owner and tenant of the lot must be a principal resident that currently exists. And that's it for my presentation here or report. Any questions?
Yes, thank you. I see several hands. Councillor Beddoes, then Pearson, then St. Pierre. And Lajeunesse.
Well, thank you very much through the chair. Thanks very much for that presentation. I guess I'm a little bit perplexed because we had a lady here today mentioning how it affects her, and I felt for her. But it says that if our vacancy rate drops or is 3% or more, we can opt out, but we don't have any way of measuring our vacancy rate. So, I mean, it's kind of redundant for that. We were tied into the CRD, which is 1.6 or 1.5%. So is there anything in the future that we would be able to calculate our own vacancy rate?
Yeah, through the mayor. So the district will be required to engage with a consultant for a housing needs assessment. This will be required as part of the Bill 44 legislation. And I think, okay, yeah, sorry. So through Bill 44, we'll be required to have a housing needs report conducted. And this is intended to guide the official community plan development as well by the end of 2025. And part of that housing needs report, it could likely identify a vacancy rate, which would, of course, we need to look at year after year if we're looking to opt out of that requirement. But it would be to be 3% or more for 2 consecutive years.
So sorry, a follow-up question. So basically, there'd be no relief for this person coming to us tonight for at least 2 years or more. So that could just have stuff. Yeah, okay. Thanks for your input. Again, it's another one of these big brushes from provincial government with not taking into account the nuances of different communities. And we're not alone. I mean, there's some communities up island that rely heavily on short-term rentals for their livelihood, for their community, and they're just wiping them out. And I don't think it's the right way to go, but that's not staff's problem. Thank you very much for that. But I'm sorry, this makes it really, really tough for some of our citizens. Not happy with it. Thanks.
Councillor Pearson?
Yes, I'm concerned when there's a number, we can get to opt out, but we don't know what the number is. So again, do we guess at that? We have 122 hotel rooms in Souk right now. We have one hotel, 122 rooms. I think somewhere in the neighborhood, I've been told that we have 341 active Airbnbs in the community. I think that's the number that I was told, 341 or something like that. We have about 175 vacancies currently in our rental pool that are in 2 buildings down the road.
That's not in the pool yet, though.
Yeah. But again, it's rental accommodation. And what's that number? We built our community on tourism. These have been built not just overnight. And you heard a speaker today, they've been built over decades and decades and decades. I actually don't believe that this is going to affect our vacancy rate. I have a intuition. I understand now that, and I don't know, I tried to look, I should ask Councillor Bateman, that Parksville has opted out.
No, they track and they never have vacancy. They want out, but they can't. So what I read in the news article is their vacancy rate is never that high. That's their problem, but it's because they rely on tourism, which is why they need the units.
Exactly.
And they need them for the workers that support all of that. So they want out, but they can't get out.
Okay. So my question through the chair to staff, what if we opted out? What if we opted out? Do we have to defend our 3%, or is that the only criteria? Because if no one can prove it, if we can't prove it, how are they going to prove it?
Yeah, through the mayor, we would have to confirm that we have 3% or above vacancy rate.
Okay.
in
And how
order
would
to
you
opt out.
propose that we do that?
Could possibly be through the housing needs report. That
But
would be
2 years
required.
from now?
We would have to be developing that this year as part of the legislation.
As
And
part of
then, and then every year thereafter, we'd have to determine what the vacancy rate would be.
But earlier in your presentation, you said that if we were to prove that it was greater than 3%, it's going to take 2 years for us to find that out.
Through the mayor, correct. 2 consecutive years has to be proven that the vacancy rate is 3% or above.
Okay. So if we opted out, my question remains, if we opted out, who does that fall on to prove it?
It would be the province would confirm. We would prove through, I'm not sure exactly what the means would be, but I imagine it would be through an assessment done by a consultant who specializes in tracking vacancy rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a comment, not a question. I think a lot of these short-term rentals have been developed in people's on people's property for decades and decades. It's not something that's just sort of magically apparent. And I don't believe that there's a magical solution that will come from this Councillor Beddoes sweeping legislation. I don't think there's a solution there, but that's my opinion.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre, then La Jeunesse.
No, thanks for the report. Sorry. I absolutely recognize that this is actually provincial legislation coming down on us. And this is just you helping us actually understand the impacts on the community and honestly, the impact on your workload, which it seems is negligible given that our bylaws are already aligned. Having said that, I have some questions nonetheless. I was wondering about the definition of a rental in this particular case, because I know that in terms of a residence, there's certain things that define a residence. For example, a hookup for a stove, having a washroom, so on and so forth. And without those things, it's not considered a residence. Is something considered a rental if it doesn't have a stove?
Yeah, typically through the mayor, typically, yeah, rental would be its own self-contained dwelling unit. So that would be something with the kitchen, bedroom, bathroom.
And a definition for a kitchen would include
Stove.
a stove. And if it doesn't have a stove, it doesn't have a kitchen, in which case it's not a self-contained dwelling unit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd be curious to know whether or not any of the short-term rentals actually all have stoves and whether or not they might want to take them out. But that's just a thought. I was wondering about the vacancy rate in motels or hotels. Is there anything in legislation that we know of that would support additional short-term accommodations being maintained if we simply have no vacancies in our hotels, motels, and our local economy is based on tourism? So is there anything in legislation about, like they're talking about the vacancy rates in terms of rentals and obviously looking at rental stock for long-term rentals? Have they also looked at the vacancy rate in motels and hotels in terms of determining whether or not we need to maintain short rentals for our economy?
Through the mayor, I'm not 100% certain, but I don't believe hotels and motels are considered as in the vacancy rate calculation.
Okay, so that might be an advocacy piece at AVIC and UBCM. Because if there's no actual vacancies in the motels or hotels, and that's the only place that tourists can go by the legislation, we need to be able to do something. And our resident was absolutely right. Dollars that go into Airbnb, not Airbnb, but specifically bed and breakfast, stay in the community. It's actually much better for the community and for the local economy. So we need to champion this sort of thing. But we need some data to go behind it. And I think that the vacancy rates on hotels and motels could help us. Thank you.
Yeah, this I think is for information, and then we can be like, okay, we have this, and let's take it away and start to process a bit more on what's next. The question I have is related to ALR lands.
I have a question.
Sorry, I forgot about Councillor La Jeunesse, and you're on the list. Sorry,
I'm
thank
e-
you.
I'm
Next
easy
time,
to
just
forget.
call a point of order, please.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I had the same question around how do we determine what our vacancy rate is, our local vacancy rate, because to have 3%. If we're looking at the region as a whole, maybe we're not. We're a little bit different than Victoria, but this was a major topic at the Housing Summit last week. I did talk to Mayor O'Brien quite a bit about this, and it is a major concern for Parksville because they have a huge tourism economy, something that we are working very hard to develop. And it seems like the only answer that he keeps getting is that if you are branded as a resort community, then you can opt out. But otherwise, unless you have that 3% vacancy rate, you cannot opt out. And we're putting a huge amount of effort into a regional tourism strategy for the Sooke Wanda Fuca. And if this legislation holds for us, we can probably scrap that with only one hotel. We have the Harbor House coming online in sometime in the spring, they're hoping, but that's still not going to cover our needs. So that wasn't a question. It is a major concern for us.
Okay, you're good? Thank you. Okay, so I have a question as it pertains to ALR lands. So my understanding here is that this doesn't apply to properties within the ALR, right?
Yeah, it would be properties that are exempt are class 9 or class 6. Sorry, 1 second.
No.
A class 9 under the BC assessment farm class. So this is ALR or not.
Okay, but then that's where some, and I don't know how to ask this question here. So the people that I spoke with, when they read this, it looks like, okay, they're exempt, but then our zoning bylaw caps it at 4. So does it apply? Or does the fact that they're ALR override ours?
Can you explain the 4?
That let me look at this here. The land is in the ALR and subject to their regulations, so that allows for short-term rentals or agritourism to 10 sleeping units. No principal residence required. So that's fine. And then under this new act, the province made an exemption of the requirement as farm class, so that's fine. It's productive class as a farm. But the Sooke zoning bylaw states that RU1 zoning permits accessory use B&Bs, but under accommodation, there's a specific area of the document which identifies that this should take place in the principal dwelling and can permit up to 4 units. So that's the confusion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, this could be a special circumstance, so I'll take it offline then. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so I'll be quick here. I guess the good news is that if you're operating an Airbnb or short-term rental of any kind as a home-based business in allowable zoning, in your principal home or your secondary suite. So we have 341 Airbnbs. How many of those are actual standalone? Or how many are actually in principal? Do you have any sense of those kind of numbers or percentages roughly?
Through the mayor, we currently have roughly 35 business licenses for short-term rentals this year. So that would be a mixture of, I guess, the home-based businesses for the vacation accommodation and bed and breakfast. Sorry, thanks.
So the requirement to get that license will really reveal the secret side of our short-term rental economy.
It's anticipated to do so, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thanks for this report, by the way, very substantial.
Okay, so on that for now, motion to receive for information. Moved by Counselor Bateman, seconded by St. Pierre, all in favor. And that's unanimous. So that's the first drop. There'll likely be more to come. Next off is into our bylaw section. There's an amendment here. It's item 9 for bylaw number 903.
Yeah, I can briefly add, staff, one of the reception staff, when they were reviewing the proposed amendments, pointed out that one of the fees was missed in updating the fees that Mr. Curry advised council on at the last meeting. So this amendment is to, and as well, the numbering was incorrect on the bylaw. So this amendment is to correct the numbering. Thanks to Mr. Schaefer. And to add that one more additional fee onto that, so that all of those fees that were described about the first time are now captured with this amendment. So we're just seeking council's to rescind the first 3 readings and give 3 readings to the bylaw as amended here.
Okay, so we'll do this together, and that is that council rescind the first 3 readings to the bylaw cited as fees and charges amendment bylaw number 903-752-10 2024. And that council, well, I guess we have to do them in separate parts because we can't rescind and never mind, I was trying to be efficient. So on rescinding, please, moved by Counselor Bateman, seconded by Counselor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. The next is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as fees and charges amendment bylaw number 903-752-10 2024 as amended. Moved by Counselor Bateman and seconded by Counselor St. Pierre. All in favor? And any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we're getting into our notices of motion. So remember, councillors, you've already read this into the record. So I'm going to read it out. If there's a seconder, you can motivate. So I'm going to read them all because you cannot motivate on moving this. And it's only if a seconder do we enter into discussion. So the first one is from Councillor St. Pierre from February 12th. And it goes, whereas the sidewalks are a community priority that enhances safety and active transportation, and whereas more rural areas of our community might not benefit significantly from a piecemeal approach to the installation of sidewalks, that therefore, I should say therefore be it resolved, but that's okay. That council requests staff report on alternative options for sidewalk contributions from those developing their properties where sidewalks appear unnecessary or would remain isolated for this foreseeable future. So that's moved already by Councillor St. Pierre, seconding by Councillor Pearson. So I go to the room first to be efficient, okay? That's, I know, but that's the downside of being virtual. Sorry, Councillor Lajeunesse, it's not personal, it's just efficiency. Councillor St. Pierre, go ahead and motivate.
Okay, the reason I decided to bring this forward is because a number of these coming forward. And we do need the sidewalks. We need to make sure that our projects are funded. We need to make sure that our sidewalk priorities go forward. But right now, as far as I know, there's no mechanism when council denies, for example, conditions, for example, in the Strata example that we had earlier, there's no way to actually recover any of that money to move it towards sidewalks and infrastructure and frontage improvements, which we do need in the community to actually meet our objectives. At this point in time, I'd like to know whether or not it's possible, and I'm looking for a report from staff, to look at options for actually gathering monies from anybody developing a property, because there is a benefit to the developer. As soon as you're actually subdividing or doing development, there's money on the table. It should be possible to actually gather it up for frontage improvements. But if those improvements don't make sense to lay people like the developers or like ourselves, then we're actually going counter to staff recommendations, which creates a very bad precedent, as has been pointed out. So I'd like to be looking at the policy to have something that actually allows us to move forward without having to actually ignore staff recommendations all the time, pay for our sidewalks, and actually benefit the community.
Okay, on the motion, Councillor Pearson is the seconder.
Yes, I agree with, sorry. Yes, I agree with Counselor St. Pierre and I appreciate this motion. I'm hoping that staff can take into consideration creation of a amenity fund specifically to the amenity that we could collect for. Because some of our rural roads, which have urban designation, don't fit having a sidewalk. I think it's pretty clear. Does nothing worse for us sitting here. And I don't know how that gets created, but I'd like to see a report on it. So, thank you.
Counselor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, I think the new ACC that has been introduced or is about to be introduced by the province may be an option here for doing this, because my understanding is that we can't take cash in lieu for sidewalks in a different neighborhood, but perhaps the ACC bylaw can help us with that.
So you're in support of obtaining a staff report?
Correct.
Counselor Bateman?
Yeah, I'm in support of this as well, and I'm curious if bylaw 404, the new look bylaw 404 will address these kind of issues with a rural town center distinction. It's also worth noting that famously in Smithers, you know, if you Google sidewalk to nowhere, we're not the first. No. So Smithers famously made the national news with its sidewalk to nowhere. And the council of the day, this is 2018, they came up with a cash in lieu clause in the bylaw, whereby developers facing situations where building short sidewalks is impractical can contribute money to the municipality for offsite works. So.
Okay, more to come. So go ahead, Counselor Beddoes.
I'm a little confused with that last statement by Counselor Bateman, because I was under the impression when Counselor Pearson was speaking that we have to get an amendment by the province, or was that Dana or Counselor Lajeunesse? Yeah, in order for us to take money out of that neighborhood and use it somewhere else, and yet we see that Smithers has done it.
Well, this is why we would get a staff.
Yeah, no, I
report.
just want to
Because I have
confirm.
no
that.
idea.
I don't have a problem with it, and
Yeah.
I'll support the motion. I just that there's a little contradiction there, and I think it's worth noting.
I'll just follow up, can I?
Briefly.
Very briefly, they did create a reserve fund where the money would go into the reserve fund for use at the time sidewalks would begin to be expanded in that particular area. So I think that's where the consistency is.
Okay, we'll obtain the staff report. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? None opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, 10.2. This is Counselor Pearson. And that is that council directs staff to develop a relevant template for amenity contributions for affordable housing contributions with all development applications. So that's moved. Is there a seconder? Counselor Lajeunesse is seconding. So it's on the floor. Counselor Pearson can speak to it.
Yes, and this has come up for us in numerous applications where we've been, there's been 2 or 3 or 4 different formulas that have been presented to us. What I'm asking for here is a consistent approach. And I don't know what the number is. I would like a staff report back to say, you know, what are best practices and what's being shared around the region for an amenity contribution to affordable housing, so that it's the same for every developer based on the number of doors.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Lajeunesse.
Yeah, I agree with that. This seems to come to us all the time, and we need to have a consistent policy to so that we don't have to discuss it every time a development comes to us.
Okay, Counselor St. Pierre.
I just got a question for staff around this. I think that the actual financial cash in lieu contributions don't actually address affordable housing in any particular way. There's other methods that are used by other communities in terms of a 10%, so on and so forth. I'm wondering if what we're looking for is just a Band-Aid in terms of a number and a formula that would actually do, you know, a per door, which sounds like what's being suggested. Are we asking for a report on how to actually achieve a 10% that's actually doing more significant work towards affordable housing? And in addition, I'd just like to know whether or not within what we're doing right now, and specifically with regards again to the development process, Are we already looking at this? And at basically revisiting this policy?
I think that's the question for staff is there anything queuing up right now through the DAPR?
Yeah, through the mayor, it was on the DAPR report from Urban Systems. You'll note that there was a affordable housing contribution policy that was intended to be developed. But with the provincial shift from the amenity contribution policy work that was being done to the ACC bylaw, we're looking at maybe pushing that, I guess, to a later phase after we're completed the DAPR work. But my understanding is that affordable housing does not fit within the amenity cost contribution discussion unless the city would be ownership of the actual infrastructure and housing development itself. But we could certainly come back with a report to discuss best practices and maybe a strategy for achieving the goal discussed here with council.
Okay. Councillor Bateman, then Beddoes.
Okay, and I'll just note that we do have an affordable housing, social housing policy of 2007, and that's where this 10% figure emerges that Mr. Anderson referenced at the outset. And yeah, I'd just be curious, very curious to understand how we moved away from that 10% of all units dedicated as affordable housing and sold at cost or rented to eligible applicants to this very low ball cash in lieu. So a little history on that subject.
Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I will support this motion. I know that we kicked around this figure of $3,000 a door, considering the cost of a home these days, which not likely to go down. That's not very much at all. So I think we certainly have to look at recovering more for affordable housing, because I'm not even, how much is in our affordable housing fund? Staff know that one offhand?
That'll come
Okay,
later.
that come
Yeah.
in a report. That's fine, because I don't think we could buy a garage with it, but I don't know.
Well, you might, maybe a door. Anyway. Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries unanimously. Next one here, 10.3 by Councillor Pearson, that the mayor appoint a council committee to work with the Souk Lions and district staff to explore potentially mutually beneficial solutions with regard to the land known as Lions Park in our town. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Yeah, I'll second for discussion.
Okay, seconded for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Again, difficult situation. We've received tons of correspondence. And we've kind of got two really good organizations and the tireless work that the Lions have put into our community for decades and decades and decades. Can't be ignored. And the way that we're kind of going down the road feels like to me that it's a winner take all. And if we make a decision going forward to rezone the property, then the park space is lost forever. It's a one-time fits all solution, and it's going to feel like somebody's winning and somebody's losing. I only propose this, hopefully and I wanted it to say the mayor consider, as opposed to that the mayor do it, so that we could maybe explore some other options that may not be just all about rezoning and selling the property. And we are promoting an enormous amount of density in that area. There's not a lot of green space. Other municipalities right around us within the last couple of months have actually secured land that they're going to take buildings off and create green space. One is at the corner of Quadra Blanchard and Hillside, that area. They bought the old Romeo's property, the city of Victoria. The township of Sydney has also purchased land in their downtown within the last 2 months. And it's just something that I think that maybe just there might be some more options in there.
Councillor Bateman.
Well, I did second that for discussion, and thanks for raising this. You know, I'm a blue in the personality type. That means I want everyone to get along, and I see another mild civil war evolving here. And I'm always one for the middle way and finding solutions. However, there is a process here. And I'd like to hear more from others and staff on where that process is at the moment in terms of the rezoning of this private piece of property.
Okay, so it's in process, so I'm going to interject here in that it's working, there's an application that's working its way through staff. So I'm not in support of certainly myself and a committee interfering with that process. If I were to be, we've already had correspondence received, there's studies and the like that need to be done by the applicants, of which they've agreed on, I understand, and are working forward towards. So now for us to interject, so anytime do we just start involving ourselves on land negotiations all over? Mayor's committee gets involved and like, no, I know that this isn't going to work, and start disrupting that process. I'm not comfortable with this motion. I think it needs to run its course, and when the applicant and staff are ready to bring it forward, then we will do our part in a fair and transparent way. Involving ourselves, to me, you have to just let the process unfold where it is. And go from there. So I'm not comfortable with this at all, and I'm not in favor whatsoever. I will go around. So Councillor St. Pierre, then Beddoes, and then Councillor Pearson, you'll have about 30 seconds to speak a second time.
I'm also very uncomfortable with this. I think it sets a terrible precedent where anytime we get a number of letters, we should be potentially setting up a mayor's committee to actually interfere with an application in process. I don't know if we could actually set a worse precedent, but I'm sure I could come up with something with enough time. We did have a chance actually to acquire this property at one point, but the community, and council could have chosen with the vote that was there to actually move forward and acquire that property, but we decided not to because, again, of a lot of public pressure. In this particular case, don't think we can actually treat the Lions as the owners of the property as any differently from any other owners of private property. They put in an application, they're working with the developers. It's going to cost them time and money if there's a delay. They might lose their opportunity to actually move forward with their plans. None of this is actually okay. I would also like to point out that it is my hope for the future, and of course this is just aspirational, that as we have to densify the town center, which is within the OCP, that there'll probably be larger properties to the back that'll be aggregated, and that we could potentially work at that point to acquire parks that will be situated within neighborhoods. Certainly that's the way that planning works. That's the way that communities actually develop.
Okay, you're drifting off of the motion here.
I will not support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, keep my emotions in check here. I think it's already set a bad precedent. I think when the Lions Club, the applicant that owns this private property that's not zoned as park, has made the past 2 decades efforts with the district to do something with that land and have not come out. One, of course, is they had a deal with Habitat for Humanity. And I know the reasons why they ended up pulling out. So I think if I was a seeded tree, I'd be asking myself, what is this deal I got myself into if the Lions are going to renegotiate with the district of Sioux? You can't do two people at one time. I mean, it's not fair to the seeded tree that has put out thousands of dollars. I think the last thing was $9,000 to $12,000 they put out to move this process along, and then to have the district start negotiating with the Lions Club for another use out of this. I'm sorry, but that time has passed. The district has had plenty of time to deal with it. And it also sends a pre-bias to citizens, and the Lions are citizens of our community, that it sends a message that, we're not really in favor of this. At least that's what it seems like to me. I am just disgusted with this whole thing. And I think we send a wrong message to the community. And I understand there's people that want to see the park, they'll get their opportunity to speak to that when the zoning comes through. And maybe that will carry the day, I don't know. But to do it this way, I think is a backdoor approach. And you know, I've talked about democracy a number of times dealing with the provincial government. And this is going to upset a lot of people, I tell you that right now.
Okay, thank you. You wanted to speak again? Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Nothing could be further from the truth of backdoor approach because you bring it forward. However, many applications are withdrawn through the process. I've sat here for 10 years and many people withdraw their applications because a better offer comes along. It was an opportunity to have a conversation. And I understand the will of council. Nothing untoward whatsoever out of it. You know, exceptional comments that are made. To put it in front of the public in a public meeting doesn't mean there's anything backdoor about it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Councillor Pearson is in favor? Any opposed? I need to see hands. So Councillor St. Pierre, Councillor Lajeunesse, Councillor Beddoes, Councillor Bateman, myself are in opposition. The motion fails. Thank you. Okay. The next one is 10.4, Councillor Pearson. That council consider receiving a presentation that explains maybe how the district could use a LSA plan to build a road that would improve Souk's internal road network. I just wordsmith like the royal we for the district. Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Yes, as we all know, the number one issue on the front of everybody's mind is traffic congestion. Many people are waiting to get home every night, spending time in their cars, not getting near their families, and are looking to us for potential solutions to alleviate or improve their quality of life on the way home from work. We had Councillor Bateman and I had a presentation, a small presentation on how an LSA could potentially help us build an internal road network or a portion thereof that may help with some traffic congestion in our community. So I just wanted to bring this forward so that council could consider receiving a report to understand how it actually works, how an LSA works. I've tried to research it and I think I've come up with a general sense, but it's no sense me trying to explain it because I don't really understand all the nuances of it. So I would like to recommend that we get an expert on LSA and have staff maybe prepare a report that we could potentially look at alleviating some traffic congestion.
Councillor St. Pierre.
Through your worship to staff, I was just curious if staff already knew all about LSAs and it's just us that doesn't. So I just wanted to ask that question of staff through your worship.
Your worship, I've certainly dealt with a number of LSAs over the years. It would be preferable for me rather than to wing it, to bring forward something on paper to you if I'm the expert you're looking for. If not, then I'm quite happy to contribute in whatever way possible.
I would actually be curious as to Councillor Pearson's intent. Would this be sufficient? Would this meet your needs?
Well, I think it's a starting point, and I just for somebody somebody from the audience was kind of waving at me. An LSA is a local service area, right? That's how you do it. Just wanted to make sure that people are aware of that. So yes, a staff presentation could be considered as an initial report to us. I think we've got offered an engineer that has done LSAs as well, but if we have a staff member that's well versed in it, I think that would be worth us exploring or have a staff presentation. I would just ask that Councillor Bateman maybe chime in here to the understanding about this engineer that.
Okay, there's a process here. Thank you. You've spoken. Councillor St. Pierre is next.
Just follow up. I was hoping actually also to hear from our engineer, Mr. Carter, who I know does nothing, well, not nothing, does a lot with roads and probably has some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and with it, thank you, Councillor St. Pierre. Through council to your worship, I'm curious to hear what this local area service would do, or if there's any further insight from the presentation you're giving that you could share that could help us build a report for you, because currently how the entire connector that will eliminate the traffic problems in Souk is set up right now. It's set up in our DCC program, and it's essentially got an entire local service area of the entire district of Souk. And as Mr. Heffernan was alluding to with urban systems as to the benefit factor, it's sitting at the 65-35%. So right now we are at like a 75% design on that. We're hoping to advance it by the end of the year. We would be collecting the portion of 35% from the community, 65% from the development community, and we're currently already collecting money for that through a local area service of all of Souk. So we could bring something forward, but if there's any insight that could be shared with us, was this to create a smaller local service area for that? Because that would essentially put a higher bill on a smaller number of taxpayers and would more or less push towards failing a referendum.
The LSA that was presented to us was looking at an entire connector or portions thereof. And I'll just say the Throop connector. It was just another tool that could be in our toolboxes that I don't understand as a counselor. Is it something that we should consider? Or is it something that is already in the works? Or is it something that we shouldn't consider? You know, is it straight referendum money that we should go borrow? LSA is just another option. The way it was presented to me, it's just another different way to approach getting things built using developers' money, DCC credits, etc.
Okay, so I'm just mindful of the time and outstanding district business that still needs to, like, anyone can present to council via the delegation process. In terms of, you know, bringing in an expert, I don't know what that's going to cost us. I don't have that information. I'm not too keen on paying something when we do have our staff that would present all of this. I think part of this, when we enter into the budget pieces, I think for me at this point, this motion should be postponed till the budget deliberations, because we are going to receive a kickoff meeting in a few days, followed by staff reporting out the various pieces about what we're going to do, and then all those various phases. So what is coming out through engineering and roadworks and the like. If at that time you're feeling that, okay, we need to advance this further, what other funding tools, it would make sense then to be like, okay, how can we greenlight this faster and achieve that then? But given that we are going ahead with the implementation of the road network, we're doing all of this, I'm not in support of this at this time, because we're doing this work. And then I think if we have missing questions like, okay, we still need to get more revenue, then I would say, okay, what other options are available then? But in the meantime, anyone can come. You don't need council's permission to attend as a delegation. It's just a matter of lining up and getting on the agenda to do that. Councillor Beddoes, and then I'll call the question.
Yeah, I was just a little confused. We've had Mr. Schaefer offer to give us a rundown on it. And is that a very long process for you to give us a rundown at a future meeting? In preparation, even with these people come and give us a presentation here, I would like to hear staff's cut of it. Is it something onerous on staff, or is it something that you could do fairly easy for us, or am I putting you on the spot?
Oh, well, not at all. No, in terms of a process discussion about how to go about it and who, you know, about how to go about constructing an LSA, a local service area, and the steps you need to go through, who might be paying for what in an LSA, because it's very specifically paid by parcel taxes by people who benefit. So I can put that together for you simply if it's a philosophical discussion about who should pay for what, who should pay for what, as opposed to who will be paying if you construct an LSA. That's something that would have to be turned over to council. But in terms of the process and the mechanics of it, I can put that together for you for your next meeting.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that question is Mr. Carter alluded to that basically the Throop Road extension is an LSA, but the people that benefit from the Throop Road extension is all of Sioux. It's not just the local people along that corridor that takes the traffic off of Highway 14. So that's why it's such a large LSA. Is my understanding of that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, like a strata road might be specific, you know, to those living at the end of a strata. In this case, this corridor, everyone in Sioux will benefit from alleviated congestion. The most recent local service areas was when we were looking at expanding the wastewater plant. So then you are creating a new local services area via Whiffen-Spit or Keltassin, where just those residences would contribute and pay. And we saw the impact of with a grant, without a grant. But anytime you're establishing a local service area, it does need to happen in the open portion. And if we're talking about creating a new LSA specific to those on Throop Road, how do you think the residents of Throop Road would feel if we're going to hit them with an additional tax just on them because they have the unfortunate coincidence of living on Throop Road, but they can build and pay out the connector? I would not be happy as a Throop Road resident, and it's alarming that you'll see individuals put up toll booths just to recover their costs. Yes, in the microphone.
There you go. That council consider receiving a presentation, explain how we could use the LSA. It's redundant because they can come and make a presentation anyways. Is that correct?
Yes, and our staff will also be
So this should be
carrying this.
worded, this should be worded that we direct staff to bring us a quick report on
But
that.
that's not how it's reading. So
Oh, I
are you
understand.
proposing an amendment?
Well, yeah, I would think this would not stand, but it's up to the person that's made the motion.
Anyone can make an amendment. So
Okay.
you could say then that council directs staff to provide a report
on local service areas.
that explains how the district could use LSA plans to build a road that would improve. Like the
Sure.
rest could say that.
Yeah.
So you could just say that you could propose that as an amendment.
I would.
Okay, so that's the amendment. Is there a seconder for the Counselor Bateman? So on the amendment, you're directing staff to bring a report forward. Okay?
Yes, true.
Counselor Bateman, anything on the amendment? You
Yeah,
don't have it
just,
on the
just
screen.
minor. It's actually the local area service. So it's an LAS.
Counselor Pearson.
Division 5 of the Community Charter. There is, I just need to, for the record, state that there is a Sioux Local Service Area Boundary Policy from 2008. So I don't know if we've discussed this since then. So I think it would be interesting to see and lots of good online material from the province.
Okay, so I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Okay, that's anyone opposed? None opposed. That's carried unanimously. So right now, we don't have the ability to amend this on the screen, but hopefully for all those that are viewing or following the bouncing ball, that council is directing staff to bring a report back to council at an upcoming meeting. Okay, is everyone clear that that is the main amended motion now? Okay, so on the main amended motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? I'm going to oppose it just because I spoke so much about it. Feel I should shake it up a bit because I feel it's coming to us anyway. Motion is carried. Okay, so I believe that's, oh, there's one more. Thank you. 10.5, this is Counselor St. Pierre. With concerns arising from correspondence requiring action at the February 12, 2024 regular council meeting, Counselor St. Pierre proposes the following motion. That council directs staff to report on how to amend definitions to home-based businesses in the zoning bylaw. Is there a seconder for that? Counselor Bateman, thank you. Counselor St. Pierre can motivate.
Thank you very much. As we became aware in correspondence, we have home-based businesses that really don't have much of an impact on the neighbors that are being restricted because of, sounds like the definitions, or at least that was my understanding at that session. I'm looking for a way to remediate that because we actually need home-based businesses and we need as many as we can get. We're actually trying to get people off Route 14. This is part of the solution. And we really should not be restricting people from having piano lessons and having those types of homemade businesses. So finding a solution is what I'm looking for. What I picked on was the definitions because that seemed to be the easiest way to perhaps achieve it, but that'll be up to staff.
Okay, Counselor Bateman.
Yeah, so I know we have a new zoning bylaw pending once the OCP is passed. So so this will obviously be a matter for discussion at that time. So I think the home-based business limited is the situation in the zones in which we're discussing here, all the multifamily zones, town center zones. And this does not include any businesses which have customers or clients who visit the site of the home-based business. And it would be great to see some simple exemptions to that.
Okay, I'll speak in support of this. I think as we're also seeing more, like next to us, we have more rental units, multifamily coming on. We have another one going its way through zoning. And we've also had some existing. So in some cases, there's been townhouse complexes. I know that this has come before. And then the problem was resolved when the renter moved and bought something and it doesn't apply. Not this particular person, but I'm aware of another resident that had the same impact. And if we are densifying and bringing more multifamily, this will be a barrier to home-based businesses. So I think it's just, we'll get the staff report and see what we can do. So we'll leave it at that. Oh, sorry, over to staff. Go ahead. Yep.
Just with the case of looking at amending the zoning bylaw for definitions, et cetera, like there is a process available to this individual who provided the correspondence, which would be a temporary use permit or also a site-specific text amendment. So there are avenues that are available to these people living in multi-unit residential complexes where the nuisances for, say, noise or client visits, which have been, strategically restricted due to the density factor and also the heightened nuisance factor. So there's a way around that, assuming that there is maybe unique circumstances where permitting something like a piano lessons or where client visits are proposed makes sense. Parking would be one of them, and also the noise factor. So a blanket approvals for home-based businesses that permit those types of uses and client visits may pose a challenge, and perhaps council may want to consider just the standard processes for temporary use permits or site-specific text amendments as an option.
Okay, no, that's very helpful, but I think that'll help just to have a report to return to that we can then direct people to consider. Might want to take up tuba lessons, and what does that sound like? I don't know.
My neighbor
Start learning the bagpipes. Go ahead, Councillor St. Pierre.
Thank you very much, because that's really useful to know and to consider. I think my wish is that as we move forward, if we know that there's exemptions that are going to want to come forward on a regular basis, that we simplify this as much for the public as possible. And if there's ways that we can actually reduce work on staff, reduce complications and costs, because there are costs involved in setting up a temporary use permit and so on and so forth. There's delays and so on and so forth. So whatever we can do, if it's possible, to streamline the process, to actually make it possible for people. My concern is that our existing systems in terms of definitions and what we allow in areas is no longer corresponding to our needs and our reality in terms of how much home-based business we want. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm curious within this report whether or not we could be looking at that. Because I think we're looking at a changing circumstance. We want to get traffic off Route 14. We want to make it easy for people. Your average layperson has quite a difficult time, as we've experienced all the time, going through our processes. So we can avoid some of the lengthier process, that would be better. So if we can find mechanisms that still actually protect the intent of our bylaws, that'd be great. If it's not possible, no, that's too bad. But I'd like to know if it's possible. And thank you so much. And sorry to put you in that place.
Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so now we're getting into correspondence. So the first one is 11.1, funding for Pacific Center Family Services. Counselor Bateman.
Okay, so 11.1 and 11.2 are both related, so I will just request that 11.1 be received for information. So I'll move that.
Move for information. Is there a seconder by Counselor St. Pierre? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 11.2.
Okay, 11.2 takes us back to our letter to the Solicitor General back in December 2022, seeking stable long-term funding for the Pacific Family Service Association's Crime Reduction and Exploitation Diversion Program. So that campaign continues, and I would, as a member of the Victoria Family Court, which is spearheading this campaign, I'd like Suk to do a follow-up letter to the, I think I sent through a motion that maybe you can put up on screen.
I don't know. Oh, here we are. Yep.
So that council direct the mayor to write Ministers Farnworth and Laurie requesting stable long-term funding and expanded staffing for Greater Victoria's Crime Reduction and Exploitation Diversion and Mobile Youth Services Team programs.
So that's moved. Do we have a seconder? No,
No,
this is
a motion
correspondence.
rising from the correspondence.
Sending a letter.
Yeah, seconded by,
Their letter.
okay, so you're assisting with writing this
Yeah,
letter?
I'll write that letter as I do for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Okay.
just confirming because
Yeah.
it's directing the mayor. I'm like, I'm not doing it. So,
No, you'll send a
As
letter.
long as your spelling's okay.
all right. I'll call a question. All those in favor? And that's any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Bateman. To direct the deputy mayor.
Not yet.
Well, soon. Okay. 11.3, Counselor Pearson. This is the proposed Jordan Solar and Energy Storage Project. So there's two. I'm just not sure if 11.3 and 11.4 are the same. Okay,
Point I want to make is that the public engagement and comment period will open February 15th, 2024 and close on March 18th. So I would like this letter to be put into the record, filed for action, that everybody's aware. That's what I just wanted to bring it forward, that there's a public comment section in there. If
okay.
you have any comments or concerns. I note that First Nations involved have been or are going to be consulted as part of this process.
Okay, so you brought it here just to elevate the
Yep.
awareness. Okay, Counselor,
Encourage people to participate.
okay, Counselor Beddoes.
Yeah, I just like maybe our communications person can put that in our, next, whatever she puts out all the time. It's not in Suk, but it certainly reflects on Suk. So just that date, it's very important.
Over to, go ahead, Steph.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to extend on the conversation that there's two specific opportunities. One is taking place on February 29th at Suk Community Hall from 4 to 7 p.m. So there's a public information happening in our community then. In addition, there's a virtual information session that will be held online on March 7th. And if people go to suk.ca/news, I have those articles, that article and link posted on our website.
Okay, so that is now, you're good to receive for information.
Yes.
Receive for information by Counselor Pearson and seconded by Counselor St. Pierre. I'll just note that these letters came to me via registered mail, and then I had to go and pick them up. And then I forget to do that sometimes. So sometimes with the delay, and then sometimes I receive really interesting correspondence that I don't necessarily accept. And so I wasn't sure, and I've gotten yet another one that I handed over through to staff. So obviously it's the delay that is taken for me to pick them up. But they don't need to come to me registered, but they are. So just to whoever sent them, we got them, they're here, and please stop sending them in that way. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's none opposed, that's unanimous, and 11.4 being the same, so receive
Yeah.
for information by Counselor Pearson, seconded by Counselor Bateman. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that's unanimous, thank you. Council verbal reports. Counselor St. Pierre is going.
As acting mayor, I had the privilege of actually, deputy mayor, that's right. I had the privilege of introducing the Souk Philharmonic, which is an amazing experience. I stayed there with my partner and took in the performance. Wonderful. I also introduced or launched in some ways, along with the musicians, the coldest night of the year, which should have been the slightly damp and fairly balmy night of the year, but that's okay. It's Souk, and that's the way it goes. It was wonderful. Lots of people, lots of good energy, and really helped to bring home why this is a really nice place to be. So, yeah.
Counselor Pearson, your microphone's on. You're going next.
I had a whole bunch of things that I didn't report on last time because we ended the meeting early. Nothing. No, I was at the coldest night of the year on Saturday night, and I think that's all I have to report. It was a great event, and the deputy mayor did an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Beddoes.
Yeah, I've been putting off my Sea Park report, so I'm going to have a really condensed version. We're on track to fully electrify Sea Park by 2030, and that's involved with replacing the boilers and the chillers, capturing that heat. And considering now about half our energy comes from gas and oil, it is great. And we had a great presentation by the CRD environmental people, and they had grants for everything. And wow, it was a great presentation. We're on the right track. The other thing is the next month, which is just around the corner, we're hiring a consultant for a long-term plan, a 10-year plan of where the community wants to go with recreation. And it's probably at the best possible time because we are bursting at the seams. So once we get that through-pro connector in, it'll be great. But there's other than that, but I would just cut it short. Thanks.
Counselor Bateman.
Okay, so I attended the Vancouver Island Regional Library AGM in Nanaimo on February 10th. Very pleasant ride there with and back with Councillor Lajeunesse, my alternate. Viral's Executive Director Ben Hyman and Viral Chair Aaron Hemmings are doing a roadshow to municipalities. So I've requested them to come to Souk. So stay tuned for that. It's also good to introduce Viral's Souk's new manager, Vicky Dolling, and she comes to us from the North Vancouver Library System, and she's leading up our team of librarians. So welcome to her. Let's see, a whole bunch of things. The annual general meeting of the Victoria Family Court, Marie-Therese Little, Mayor of Metchosin, was reelected as chair. And as you know, we're continuing the advocacy for MIST. Coffee with Council. There was a day-long community consultation by the Alliance to End Homelessness in Greater Victoria that I attended with Don Brown. And he and I are involved, as is Al and Tony, and Kevin has attended our meetings and Dana attends. The Souk Homelessness Community Advisory Team. We had our third meeting at WorkLink a couple of weeks ago. So that's unfolding, and I could go on at length on that subject, but I just quickly reference that pretty remarkable meeting in Ed McGregor Park, which was organized by Ms. Mogg. I finally got that right. Moog. No. Damn, Moog. And CAO Gray, and 4 of us attended, the 4 of us here. And we met with like 30 neighbors, and they spoke their truths about tenting in Ed McGregor Park, and the district has come through with a pretty remarkable action plan. And the park has been cleaned up, and those tenters have relocated elsewhere, which of course is, you know, the consequences. So it is a very deep and wicked issue, and I'm glad you folks will be attending as we continue to try to come up with some solutions. And Coffee with a Cop, and the Juan de Fuca Tourism Destination Plan meeting, which perhaps Dana Lajeunesse would like to speak to.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Lajeunesse.
Okay, I don't have my notes, so I'm just looking at my calendar and so this is going back to last month to January 29th, the Coffee with Council, which was very well attended. And the following day, I was off to Richmond for the Local Government Leadership Academy. Always a great event, and great networking with colleagues from around the province. And I attended the Wounded Warrior Run at the Legion, the kickoff for that. Community healthcare meeting. The Destination Greater Victoria 2024 business plan launch in Victoria. So a lot of really great work going on there, and they are involved quite heavily with our local tourism association to develop a tourism plan for the West Shore to Port Renfrew. And let's see, a few things that are relevant. And as Councillor Bateman mentioned, the Vancouver Island Regional Library AGM is the first meeting that I was able to attend there. Some amazing things happening with the library and kind of their desire and to reinvent themselves. It's some very exciting things happening there. I was going to say last week, but it's 2 weeks ago, I was at the 2024 Housing Summit in Vancouver, looking at various things there. The BC Builds program that the province announced, and one of the exciting things I thought about that, and not sure how it applies to us, but the province will be providing up to 225,000 per door for rental housing, and I'm hoping that we can somehow leverage that for the community health center as well as the gathering place. Attended the Sooke Housing Coalition Community Advisory Committee meeting. What else? The Regional Water Supply Commission. West Shore Arts and Culture Intermunicipal Committee last week. And the Juan de Fuca Corridor Tourism Destination Plan also last week. And unfortunately, sorry, my voice is not at its best. Our economic development officer has put together an amazing group of people to work on that plan. And as mentioned, the Destination Greater Victoria is heavily involved, and Destination BC. There were representatives from Modi and BC Parks and many others in attendance. Yeah, that's about it. Sorry, I don't have my notes, or I would add a little more detail to some of those.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. Just for myself, I'd like to thank all members of council and our staff just for their support from the start of the year. Just a rough start, been immersed in aging, elder care, and end of life. and none of it is what you think it's going to be. So I could probably write a handbook on what that all looks like. You know, but I was fully immersed in it, obviously caring for my father till his passing. So thank you to those for really stepping up and for the support. I felt it and I appreciate it immensely. That all said, I did make it out to the Coffee with COP, and a good takeaway from that is how can we work together, in particular, getting into a younger audience, being that with our youth. So we had some conversations on what we set up perhaps at the high school that would be specific to the student population. And then how do we do more community outreach? So there's just some thoughts emerging, but that's something that as we get into strat planning, we can flesh out a bit more on what that looks like. So I'm not putting a notice of motion on that forward just yet. I missed out on the Local Government Leadership Academy. I am a director at large still with that organization. So we'll be going through the debrief part and what's coming up next through the upcoming forums. I was also elected again or acclaimed as the chair of the South Island Reconciliation Advisory Committee. So that would be the local government arm of what the Timucua Treaty negotiations look like. And so we're just waiting a bit, but looking to schedule up a meeting and that'll happen soon or in the regular sequence that it is. I did attend the housing summit and on the one day only because it conflicted with the regional board that occurred on the Wednesday, and have a follow-up with BC Builds along with some staff just to understand more about the program and what we could do and what takeaways from that and what might make sense here in Souk. So getting just more information because it was a general presentation. So then it's just understanding more where can we actually collaborate here together. And I just actually want to expand a bit on Councillor Beto's work over at Sea Park. The big takeaway there is that the facility will be net zero by 2030. And so the big win there is the heat recovery that's occurring with the arena dehumidifier, electric boiler installation, and the complete shift that's occurring there. And it's all lined up there. I knew it was happening, but didn't quite see it. And so actually hear that we're achieving that out in 2030 is really exciting for the community. And also looking at other possibilities to the systems on how the two can work together, the arena and the pool, and capturing the loss of heat that occurs through both of those systems. And naturally, it's an excellent segue into Councillor Beto's pushing out the 10-year plan, which is really essential because I've been meeting with I met with the Community Association today and other providers of recreation. They're getting the numbers in and there's a real surge in activity. So how do we continue building community and meeting the needs of growing families? And even with Sea Park, all trails coming to Sea Park, the pool did hit occupancy load. And if we keep driving people there, the biggest disappointment is people having to wait for people to exit the pool in order to get in. It's fire code. It's not a COVID thing. It's just full capacity there. The exciting piece though is that lifeguard and swim instructor complements are full again. So there's been excellent work thanks to the collaboration of Sea Park, Lions, Rotary, the district, all looking to really encourage young people to get into this forum, and it's working well, which is exciting. The other one for younger, well, for all ages is the skate park consultation will kick off. The area, the skate park's been patched, but it's done. So there's community outreach in terms of what that's going to look like to come up. And that's all coming. And the road sign is also going to be replaced. It's just unfortunate. One side of it's blank. So an ask to staff is that once upon a time, we were able to light that area, the rock and Christmas lights. And then when the light, that sign went in, the cables got disconnected somehow. So this might be an opportunity just to see where we can get power back to light that sign, because we can't do that right now because it got cut off with the road sign. For parents, summer camp registrations early, starts March 13th. Make a note of it because you got to think about it because it's busy. So I'll leave it at that. And again, just thank everyone for their work. I'm still in catch-up mode. So to residents who have not heard from me by email or phone, I know you're in the 800 emails that I have, and I'm getting to you. I promise. I'm just slow. And thanks to those who reminded me that my district cell phone still has an out of town November date on it, and I will get around to fixing that at some point too. So I'm aware it's in the queue. Thank you very much. And on that, I am going to look then for council to adjourn the regular open meeting and reconvene the in-camera meeting in 10 minutes. So 10:10 to reconvene the in-camera. So Councillor Lajeunesse, I will Teams you somehow.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, all in favor? And any opposed to adjournment? Nope, it's carried.